There we go. Can you hear me, Terry?
I can. Good. Okay. Good.
All right, here's Rick.
have a quorum. We have 4 out of the 5 of us that are here, so I will call a meeting to order. It's a little over after 7 o'clock. We have the minutes for May 5th, 2020 to take up tonight and to approve. Is there a motion to approve? I can't hear you.
My apologies. I move to amend the minutes of May 5th, 2020 with any amendments thereto.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no corrections to the minutes, all those in favor of approving the minutes of May 5th, 2020, raise your hands. Don't see your hand, Gordon. Jeff, you're not on my screen for some reason.
Jeff's raising his hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
hand is raised.
So we have 3 approving, none negative votes, and 1 abstention.
Yes, please.
We'll move on to public comment. If there's anyone on the line, Eric, that would like to give us public comment tonight.
Terry, I'm checking. I put a message in the chat. I had one person reach out to me before, and it doesn't appear they're logged into Zoom right now. So it appears there's no one looking to make public comment at this time.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we'll move on then to the Independence Day celebration. And Todd Goodwin apparently is going to join us by Zoom as well.
I'm getting Todd patched in right now.
Good.
Am I on?
You are.
Okay. So everyone has the memo in front of them, and it's addressing the July 4th celebration
Yes.
activities and fireworks. And we're just looking for some guidance from the select board. Right now is such where they're not allowing large groups to gather and such. So our options would be to cancel all July 3rd and 4th activities and fireworks at this time, or cancel the activities for July 3rd and 4th and hold the fireworks at a later time, maybe when we get together. Or the third option is cancel stuff now, but then try to put together as much as we can of activities and fireworks when we're allowed to gather back as a community and group or whatever else. And some of those activities that we may be able to do with which some short notice and get going would be like the 5K run, possibly run by the Rotary if they're on if that's something that they want to do. The town band may want to play. The activities on the green are sponsored by Cross Point Church. They've reached out to us and they possibly would want to work with us, and then have the fireworks type of things. I'm not sure about vending, and it would all be based on what the state guidelines are, what we're allowed to do, what we can do, and if we at all can do anything. So just kind of looking for some guidance. So I got groups reaching out right now as to what we're doing, what does the July 4th look like, and where we're kind of going from there. We know that a few areas around us have canceled, but not everybody has made that decision, as the memo says.
Sorry, Todd, how much time do we have left to make this decision?
Of canceling or not?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
In all fairness to vendors and everybody else involved.
Now they're starting to call, because this is the normal time that we would start registering for the parade and getting vendors and such like that. Checking with the fireworks company, they would need 15 days to 30 days, and that's all of us having to re-get permits and stuff like that and to schedule, and they're willing to work with us. And if we just cancel the fireworks outright, there's no fee or cost or anything like that. So, it may also come down to what's there for next year's budget when we're talking about $8,500 worth of fireworks.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments from board members or staff?
I guess the only other comment I would make is I would love to wait until the very last minute that we can, not to put the town or anybody at risk, but because at this point, I just feel that the people need these things to look forward to. And I certainly respect and understand the fact that we want to make sure everybody's safe. And I certainly don't want to put money out there or put people on hold to their detriment. But I, for one, am pretty desperate to see some good cheer, happiness, community spirit, that sort of thing together. So if we have the ability to wait even a few more days just to see what the governor comes down with in the next, I would love to see if we could make it to Friday of this week just to see what he comes down with, what his recommendations are. I certainly understand if we can't.
So I share the same opinion as Joey. I think I don't want to put the town at risk for fees or additional things that are going to cost us money. But if we can buy just even if it's a few days, we know that things are ever changing depending on how in the state. But I do feel like people are wanting and willing to participate at a safe level if possible. So I would be leaning towards if we can hold out a little bit longer to do the same.
So
Are we? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Are we looking to hold out on everything for July 4th? Because for that date, two reasons is we got to start putting in for permits to close the roads for parades and stuff like that. The other piece on the parade issue is the summer staff that we hire for camps are the people that we use to coordinate the parade, as in the lineup and such. And those are people that are working in camp that need to return to camp. And right now I'm working out a plan to be able to offer camps, and I would hate to put those people in a situation of being in the community where I understand what you're saying of the gathering, but there's still that the virus is out there, that if I don't have those people to work come Monday morning, it puts us in a hard place. And that's just the parade. So, I mean, if we're saying the parade is not a good thing, and the other thing too is if our town offers a parade and Richmond is canceled and the places around us is canceled, those people are going to come to Williston and they're going to be sitting in a very close proximity to each other to be watching a parade. Whereas maybe the activities on the green and the fireworks happen with whoever wants to participate into that. So I'm just kind of looking at what pieces and parts are we looking to want to hold on to wait to see the whole thing, or maybe just whatever we can put together.
That was an incredibly valid point. And I hadn't
presented that. Sorry, Joy.
Nope, go ahead, Gordon.
I think my opinion is option 3, where things are canceled, but you could hold some things, and that kind of gives a little flexibility. I know we don't have a lot, but just to wave it all away, that's not what I'm leaning towards. And I know the virus is there, and I respect it, and I want people's safety at utmost for sure.
I think that's where I was too, Gordon, going the same way of going, probably you may have to cancel the parade, Todd, and I understand that in order to keep everything in line. But if there's something we could salvage out of this that we can delay a little bit before our decision, that would be my preference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can definitely salvage the fireworks because I think that people can gather and be social distancing, sit together as a family group, but another group's over here. And that kind of happened with fireworks anyways. Everybody's kind of in their cars or around their cars or they're sitting off, but they do come together. But we would just need to help to communicate and educate people that they need to stay away and protect. So the fireworks are definite. If we have the okay from the state to get together as a group, the activities on the
We just lost you.
Rick, is that something that if the fireworks, is that still
vendors
within
and
our budget?
activities. And so if we had that, I could always add Cross Point Church. Cross Point Church it sponsors all that, so we don't pay anything out. So our expense would be some portalettes for the evening, so the fireworks. So if we're talking $9,000 to $10,000, and we got that already budgeted we already got that budgeted for next year's budget. There's I think 11.5 in there, and we'd probably only be 8.5 with the fireworks, and it probably about another 1,000 or so. And we could do all those activities, right? Say at Allenbrook at night, have all the activities that Cross Point does, and then we have the fireworks. So it's also confined to just a couple hours rather than over 2 days type of thing. And again, and maybe if the town band wants to play, and we'll work them into that piece as well. I mean, I'm not sure all the players at this point in time that want to. I know the Federated Church said they're going to do the ice cream social, but if they can't get together, they're going to cancel that now. And if they can't do it safely, they're going to cancel. So they would have their own choices. For us as a town, the fireworks are the only thing. The parade and fireworks are the only two things that we're responsible for.
Rick, I was going to say, I'm waiting for you to chime in on this because I'm now concerned about what our budget allows us to do.
Well, my point wasn't going to be about the budget, although that certainly is a concern. I share, Joy, your feelings and Gordon's feelings about wanting to have something to celebrate after all this. I think we can do a fairly decent celebration. It'll look different, but I think that it's going to take some time to plan. And so my suggestion would be to delay it, say, to the end of August. We'll pick a date towards the end of August and maybe even have a modified type of parade. I think the normal parade may be problematic, but perhaps we could have a kind of an ongoing parade throughout the day that visits neighborhoods and things and includes more than just fire trucks and police cruisers. It might include music and old cars and whatever. But it's going to take some planning to do all that. And I think even the Rotary Club, I know they want to hold their race, but that's going to take more planning. And I'm not sure we have enough time between now and July 3rd or 4th to do all that in a way that is thoughtful and accommodates all the needs that we have.
I would say it's absolutely critical at this point that something be done on July 4th. I feel really strongly about that. I certainly understand planning later for parades and other things that you might want to do, and maybe it is an end of the summer celebration, but I don't think people are going to handle well just everything being stopped for July 4th. I certainly understand not a parade, but I would want to at least see the fireworks. That's me, and maybe I'm the only one who feels that way.
Well, I'll step in. I'm having a hard time envisioning that come July 4th, we, society, social distancing, those types of things will be in a position where we're ready to hold the parade or the fireworks. Those are large mass gatherings, and I just think we need, my personal opinion is we need to err on the side of caution and cancel those or postpone. Maybe cancel isn't the right word. My thoughts are a little bit of it's always going to be hard to celebrate the 4th of July on a different day, particularly if it's like August or something. And so one option might be to have one hell of a 4th of July next year.
So I was thinking somewhat along the same lines as Joy, having the fireworks on the night of July 4th, but nothing else to go along with it. So crowds would not gather in any one particular place. And then we know we have a holiday coming up in September called Labor Day. We could have a Labor Day parade or a parade on Labor Day, along with other things that go along with it, providing we get the clearance in the next couple of months to do that.
Gordon?
Yeah, I'm still looking at Todd's proposal on option 3, and Jeff, I totally understand your concerns. They're mine as well. But even at minimum of having a fireworks celebration, people could stay in their cars, and that's their own family, and no one's congregating in a mass area. You have to park. I know a lot of people walk too, but I think there's enough time to plan that. And I don't know. I'm looking at Rick here too, but I just feel like something, and it doesn't mean that we're carving that in stone tonight. I want to leave at least one option open, because something, I'm hopeful. We have no idea where this is going day to day, but I am hopeful that things will keep progressing, not to the level that we're going to have a normal, whatever that means, 4th of July. But I do think the townspeople are looking for something. And if it deems that, the governor says no, then it's no.
Can I ask a question? If we were to hold something like the 4th of July, the fireworks, is there a liability question or issue that the town might be faced with because we encourage the mass gathering, the fireworks? I want to make sure that there isn't something out there that we aren't thinking of now that maybe we ought to. That
I would
really
respect.
Good point.
I would respectfully put out there that it would be the town's obligation to put out, we are encouraging you to stay in cars and watch. We're encouraging you to not mass gather, and put an assumption of the risk in there. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just pure common sense.
It is, but it's, the concept I'm worried about is, but we're saying everybody come to this one field or large field.
But you don't have to, Jeff. You can watch I can watch from the upstairs room of my house and see the fireworks. People can watch from any number of places to do that. I just think at a time when everybody has become so isolated and so alone, that the time of coming together to celebrate our country, if you can do it safely, is a way to do it. And I respect what you're saying. I hear you.
Yeah. It's the do it safely part that I guess I'm, when there's so many variables I'm concerned about. And I'll stop there.
Can I just clarify? Are we saying go with the fireworks if the governor opens up large gatherings? If he's still saying that large gatherings should not be congregating together or getting together, then we should not be doing this type of thing. Because I'm fearful for right now. They're saying we can open up courts like basketball and whatever else, and individuals or groups under smaller than 10 being, and family members being the best thing, and no organized sports or leagues can play. I'm saying no to adult soccer, ultimate frisbee, volleyball, and all these other ones. And then we turn around and say, oh, we're having the fireworks and everybody can come together. But we don't have the state guidance where large groups should be coming together. So for me in recreation and parks, on one hand, I'm saying no to this group because this is what the state guidelines is. And then when I'm going against the state guidelines by offering the fireworks.
I think what I'm struggling with is we're making a decision that's so far, not so far, but so far away. I understand that provision for right now, but we're talking about an event July 4th, which is over a month from now.
Well, the problem, of course, is that we need to make decision now for the planning to get everything in place. I think the only thing we can do as far as Todd's issue is to check to see if, taking the proper precautions, we can hold the fireworks as we've talked about here. I guess we're not in the position necessarily to know what the governor and the governor's office would say on that point. And the other issue is breaking this into two different celebrations. One would be the fireworks, from what I've heard, but also I sense that there's other activities that we might want to do, and perhaps we can do that as part of a Labor Day celebration.
And I guess this brings me back to the point I was originally making, is how long do we have to make the decision on the fireworks? I understand the parade was now, we've tabled that. How long before we have to make, Todd, the decision on the fireworks? A week, less than?
I don't have an exact on that. We're all set for the fireworks and the company's all set. So it would just be a matter of letting the company know that, yes, we're going to go on the 4th, or no, we're not going to go on the 4th. And I don't know what their timeline would be. I guess I would say at this point in time, I would like to be able to give them a week or two notice that we're either going or not going, and going to do it at a later date or whatever else. So if we're talking just the fireworks, then we not cancel. We postpone everything else to a later date that we can get together. We see if we can do these fireworks properly in the right way, wait for the state, and then come back to you guys, say middle of June or so, to make that decision.
I would be good with that. You guys, Jeff, Gordon?
I'm hesitant. I'm willing to wait, but I just don't see how this is going to be possible, how responsible and possible. I just think the reality as I see it is, even if we are allowed to hold, or we, the society, greater we, is allowed to hold larger gatherings, I'm having a hard time seeing that it's a good idea to hold such a large gathering so soon. I think we need to be more err on the side of caution.
Gordon?
I guess I'm going to hold with my thought on, if we do have the time to wait, why don't we? And maybe we're going to be deemed by the state that we can't do anything. I certainly don't want to put any townspeople or any public in harm's way of not being safe, Jeff. So I hear wholeheartedly your point on that. But I also feel if we do wait and we have an option to talk about it in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, whatever that might be, we can vote yay or nay on that then. And I don't think we're making a decision on that. We're just leaving an option open. That's where I'm at.
Can the board,
Just,
Go ahead, Rick.
just to make it clear, well, go ahead, Rick. Say what you're going to say, then I just want to wrap it up as to
Yes.
what I'm going to do tomorrow, type of thing.
right, well, actually, my goal was the same as yours, Todd.
Okay.
I think I'm hearing that well, I'm not sure what I'm hearing, but let's say, let me guess. Let's say that on the issue of the fireworks, that it should be tabled until June 2nd, which is the board's next meeting. That will give us some time to check with the governor's office to see what kinds of restrictions might or might not exist in holding this kind of event, and see if we get the go-ahead on that. And that won't create any problems with the fireworks company as far as I understand it. The issue about all the other activities, I think we do need a clear direction now, because there's lots of lead time for all these groups to get ready, even for July 4th. And I think there is an alternative potentially where we can schedule something later in the summer, early September, and plan it so that even if there are restrictions still in place, we can still hold something. Is my reading of the board accurate?
Yes.
That's what I thought. I heard as well.
Hey, if we wait till late September, we can hold it on my birthday.
Well, put it in October for mine, but
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
How about February for mine?
So what I'd like to do is tomorrow reach out to all the players that things are postponed, except for the fireworks that are tabled for a later date of end of summer, beginning of September, to do a celebration of coming all back together again. But the fireworks, we're waiting on to see if we can have those on July 4th.
that's right.
All right, so that's what I will go forward in doing. I will send out an email tomorrow letting everybody know that we have postponed all activities other than the fireworks, and we're on hold at those right now as to what the state is allowing us to do and what the board, it's tabled with the board at this time.
Yes.
All right, I will do that. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Todd.
Good job.
So let's move on then to the 5 Tree Hill Management Plan update. Melinda Scott is on the line.
Yep, I'm getting her connected right now.
Good.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Melinda.
Hey, Melinda.
We
Hi.
do have your memorandum and the town plan that you presented to us. So if you give us a brief description of what's different in the plan, or if there's anything different in the plan.
Sure. So the last management plan for 5 Tree Hill was developed back in 1998. I think shortly after it became a country park, and quite a bit has changed actually. Back then, the property was being used for mountain biking, and there were quite a few conflicts with mountain bikers and other users, which is why the town decided to close the park to mountain biking. So when that plan was written, they were right in the midst of that decision making, whether or not to keep the park open to mountain biking, and that was resolved in the intervening years. But as far as other things, besides that, not much has changed with the park. The park, I am not sure when this happened, but the park started posting, or the town started posting the property boundaries prohibiting hunting. And today that policy still stands. Notably, in this plan, I have included some language about the town recommending that the town periodically reevaluate that policy of posting country park boundaries against hunting. And the reason that I included that language is there are some issues with that policy, which I've outlined in I guess the two paragraphs starting. I think it starts on page 13 or 14. Namely that the state has very stringent posting requirements, and it's very challenging to meet those requirements to a letter. And in order for that, the prohibition against hunting to be enforced by the state game wardens, you have to follow the state statute related to posting to the letter. And it's just, it's not easy to follow it to the letter. And it's an easy thing for someone to sabotage as well. So the difficulty of implementing it, the difficulty of enforcing it, also because some trails that are public trails pass over private land where the town has no control over posting against hunting. So the trail for Five Tree Hill starts on Sunset Hill Road, crosses through private land to get into the town country park. And then, so there's about half a mile of the trail that's not within the town owned property. So that to me poses an issue because we don't have the right to enforce no hunting on a section of that trail. So anyway, I got a lot of public comments related to the language on hunting between the first and the second drafts, between the first and the final drafts. I softened the language considerably. I think the first draft read, reconsider the policy to prohibit hunting in the park. And this draft says, periodically reevaluate that policy to see whether it makes sense. And I also inserted some language at the very end of the paragraph that says, no changes are being proposed at this time. We're not going to suddenly allow hunting in the park without going through a separate public hearing process where the public gets to vet that and provide feedback. So that's all I have to say about it. And I will, if you have questions about it, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Good. Thank you very much. The one part that I did notice is one you just went over as far as hunting goes. So thanks for clarifying that. So questions from the board?
Same, Melinda. Jeff here. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you? I'm fine, thanks.
Pretty good. Has there been any request to allow hunting on the park?
Well, interestingly enough, one of the comment letters is from Dan Boomhauer, who's an abutting landowner, and I mailed out a letter soliciting comment from all the abutting landowners, and he's one of them. And he actually recommended not posting the property and allowing hunting. And he allows hunting on his property. And incidentally, one of our public trails goes through his property. So, but yeah.
And a follow-up question would be, seeing how there's this concern that even though hunting is posted, there still is, risk to users of the trail system. Would it make sense to close the trails during hunting season?
That is one possibility. I would recommend just posting a sign. Whether or not the town allows hunting, posting a sign saying it is hunting season. the trail does pass over private lands, people may be hunting. So use caution.
I was actually thinking a little bit, I mean, believe me, I'm not saying this is what I think needs to happen. I'm just questioning if maybe it would a more definitive, no, these trails are closed for the 2 weeks during which hunting occurs. At least rifle hunting occurs.
Right.
These trails are closed. And again, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just sort of suggesting it might be one option because it does talk about when hunting season is occurring, there is a risk to users of the trail. And that just isn't going to go away. So that might be an option. But of course, that exists with probably multiple of our town parks. You mentioned the Boomhauer property. I assume maybe even the Mud Pond Country Park is maybe in a similar situation. Okay, moving on. Is it fair to say that this plan pretty much mimics, or maybe another way to put it, there are really no significant changes from the previous plan? Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say, except expounding on hunting and the problems, and also that there's not a whole discussion about mountain bikes. That's discussion was pretty much closed years ago.
Oh, okay. Yes, that's dead and gone now. Okay.
Yeah.
It's more. This is an observation. It's not really meant to be even a comment. But the observation is when it gets to a lot of the aspects of it, it's try to maintain the natural area of the country park, except when you get to the summit. And in the summit, it seems to be the concept is to keep it an open area, even though it probably over time doesn't want to be an open area. It would rather resort to, I don't know, you mentioned the white pine, eastern red cedar, and staghorn sumac. So I guess that's just one of the values of the country park. The Five Tree Hill Country Park is that view shed, and thus it should be maintained.
Yes, it is. It is an important value of that park, and was stated in the original management plan and restated here. I also got a few comments related to the view shed and people's desire to keep that open.
Yeah, I saw that. It just to me was that kind of juxtaposition of trying to present the natural aspect of it, except for this kind of one area where it's going to look awfully nice, but in a sense, it's not natural because it's not what the forest wants to do. The forest actually wants to do something different. We're just preventing it. Okay, and then my last thing, under the action schedule, under the long term, 5 to 10 years, and I get it, these are all going to kind of meld together. It long term doesn't mean you can't do it until year 5 or beyond. But the third bullet down, which is feasibility of forest management activities, and it's really more the working with the county forester that I personally think should happen sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right that it is a little bit arbitrary, the order of these things, and I sort of had to figure out. It's kind of figuring out priorities and what can you do in so much time, that kind of thing. Yeah,
totally get it. And it certainly is not a showstopper for me. It's just, I don't know, just something I saw. So I thought I would comment on it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, also,
Go ahead.
yeah, also just one more comment. Given that the county forester is spending a lot of time right now working on the forest management plan for Catamount, and that he will be involved with that for the next few years. I don't want to burn him out. So, by asking him to work on this as well.
That's a good point. On the other hand, he's already in town.
True.
Yeah. And then my last comment will be, and it's not about the plan itself, but it's more about whether we want to wait a select board meeting to see if through our process here in the select board of reviewing this, we might actually get comments coming in. Probably not a good chance of that happening, but it still could happen. We'll, potentially be on channel 17, that type of thing. Is there any liability out that you're aware of if we were to wait to approve this at our next meeting?
No, certainly. That's fine.
Yeah, then this is to the other select board members. That would be my preference on the chance we might get a comment that we should know about in the meantime.
Or we decide that. Are there any other comments or questions from other board members? Hearing none. Is there any objection to holding approval of this until 2 weeks from tonight? Hearing no objections, then we will postpone action on that until June 2nd.
Thank you, Melinda. Good job.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you.
Same thing. Yeah, it's Conservation Commission also.
Yes.
Thanks.
Moving on to Oak Hill Estates request for the consecutive water system designation. We have a whole bunch of information on this, and I think Rick is going to talk about this first of all.
Rick, you're muted.
You're muted. There you go.
Okay, I was starting to say.
Can't hear you.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah.
Hello?
Let's see, Tyler.
So let's see. So I want to refer you to the information I put together, specifically the background information. Probably the fourth paragraph in that document is the one that is most important. And that talks about what happens if the town agrees to an exemption to the Oak Hill water system. And the state has said that the Oak Hill water system permit goes away. And as far as they're concerned, that system is now, at that point, part of the town's water system. But they also said that if the town decided at some point in the future, the Oak Hill water system permit could be reactivated. So we did get an opinion from legal counsel on this matter, and I have not shared that publicly because it's an opinion to the select board. I have shared the basic conclusions with Mr. Dawson, and the basic conclusion was that if the town were to consider an exemption or approving the exemption, then we should develop a written agreement with the Oak Hill water system to make it very clear who is responsible for what. And the idea is that they would continue to be responsible for the maintenance costs of their system, which they have right from day one. And so I think, and as my understanding, that is pretty much what the Mr. Dawson has proposed in his earlier comments. So I guess I'll finish at that point and answer any questions as they arise.
Questions for Rick from the board?
I thought both your summary, Rick, and David Rugg, did I say that name correctly? Explanation of what he believes the town should do were very good, very clear. I guess it's my observation of, given all that it's being recommended that be addressed in a consecutive water system agreement with Oak Hill Estates that the town should require, is there really, why would Oak Hill Estates actually want to pursue this? Because the requirements that would be in that agreement that's being recommended we enter into are so onerous compared to, at least what I understand is their current requirements are having their own permit right now, own private water system permit. And does that make sense?
Well, I let Mr. Dawson address that partially, but since he hasn't seen the legal opinion, he can't address the details of that.
Okay, then that might be it. I'm wondering if the medicine is worse than the disease.
Well, that would have to be determined as part of the negotiation process.
Right, exactly.
But the one point I did forget to mention, and it's an important one, is the cost of our legal fees. I have suggested that the Oak Hill Water System be responsible for those fees. And I checked with our attorney, and he gave us an estimate. And so if the board wanted to, we could agree to a not to exceed number. But that would have to be approved, before we move forward, the Oak Hill Water System would have to weigh in on whether they're agreeable to that.
Any further questions for Rick before we go to Mr. Dawson?
No.
Mr. Dawson, you're on.
Okay. Hi. Thank you.
Hey.
There's a couple things just to go smooth over on the background that Rick put together. The second paragraph, it's just a housekeeping thing, but Hector didn't build any of the homes. He just sold the lots. The individual homeowners built the homes, and there's a total of 20 right now, not 22. There's 2 lots that haven't been built on. And then there was the concern about the plastic pipe, but it's important to know that we all our whole system is not all plastic. The part that serves over Lake View, which is the second phase, Second Street, that is ductile iron. So we're not in complete non-compliance. Okay. But more importantly, but also on the 4th paragraph that Rick was referring to, and in the sentence where in the eyes of the state, the town is responsible for the operation and maintenance of Oak Hill Estate's water system. This has been the crux of the problem from day one, and I have been trying for months basically to get the state to give me a really clear understanding about this. Unfortunately, or not, but Tim Raymond was the original contact, and that's the same person who Bruce Hoare talked to and got his information from. But after that, Tim had put me up to his boss, who was Ellen. And after I saw the latest communication between Rick and Tim, I had some more clarification. So I asked Ellen for more clarification, and I didn't know that she had been put on leave or she wasn't there. So she didn't see my email, and I didn't see her non-response. So then I had to go to her boss. Eventually, anyway, on Friday, I got an answer from Ben Montrose, who is the boss that's taking care of Ellen's position. And there is clarification on that question. And he said again that the town would not be responsible for the infrastructure. So I can forward all that, but I don't want to get into the weeds of it. But he's pretty clear that unless we convince the town to take over our infrastructure, which we're not asking for, and the town's not going to do, we're always still going to be responsible for all of our equipment and our piping. And if we spring a leak, that's our problem. We fund that. So there's a lot of answers to my questions from Ben that really, I think, put to rest any concern about asking the town or requiring the town to take care of any mechanical or physical part of our system. And he further went on to say that we don't actually go away as a water user in the state's eyes. He uses the term, the analogy I have used in the past is the system isn't deleted but grayed out in the database, and it can be resurrected at any time. If, for instance, we come to an agreement and we don't do something right and the town says, you guys screwed up, we're not going to take care of this anymore, we instantly reemerge in the state's eyes, but we haven't actually ever gone away permanently. It's simply asking the town to test the water and report on the quality of the water. So when we go forward, maybe with Dave, I can provide those things as backup to the concerns, but I am at a disadvantage because I don't know what Dave recommended to the town. I do know Dave. I've worked with Dave in the past because I'm also the president of the St. George Town Center Association, and Dave worked for St. George. And I've worked with him a lot. We had to redo the whole set of documents for that association a couple of years ago. So I worked with him on all of that. And I'm familiar with him and his work. And I would prefer to say that perhaps if you would agree to it or allow, I would propose a draft to him, which is similar to the way we worked before. It might help save a little bit on the cost, but it may also give me a more firm number on his estimate that I can take to my members and vote on, because we have to vote on I have to have something that's pretty concrete, to say we are going to spend this. And I was going to say if you would allow that approach, I would draft something to send to Dave to get his estimate, maybe a closer estimate. I know we would still be paying for his fee to even look at that, and I understand that we can pay that fee without having a vote on that amount. But it would obviously be helpful to us to know what Dave is recommending. If what you're implying is that there's a lot more requirement that he wants than we would be willing to do, yes, it wouldn't make sense. But I don't see why that would be necessary. But if that's the tact to not really do the agreement, then that's a different issue, I guess. I did also ask the state if they have other agreements that I could look at to get an idea of what other people have done. And Ben at the state said they actually don't require and want the agreement. They just want to know it exists because they don't want to become involved in the liability of it. But he did give me a list of 30 other systems that have these agreements that I could perhaps approach them for a copy of to see what others have done.
Okay.
So that's where I'm at. But it would be helpful to know what Dave is proposing, so I could be, better informed, I guess.
Thank you. The board has the ability to make the document from the attorney to be made a public document if we wish to. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want to do that, but maybe, Rick, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I have no opinion on that.
Then I would propose that we make this a public document. The email from David Rugg to Rick. Is there any objections to making this a public document from the board?
Not from Jeff.
Okay. I don't hear any objections to that, so we will make that a public document. And Mr. Dawson, that'll be, you may have that, of course, now, since it's a public document. You may wish to talk to Mr. Rugg about that.
Okay.
So,
well, Terry, I'm a little, I don't want to have us incurring legal fees
right.
At the direction of Mr. Dawson. So that, we have to have some sort of agreement going in as to who's going to cover these costs And I know that Mr. Dawson's going to want some sort of limit on that. So we have to come to some agreement on that issue before we get too far into this. But
Sure.
I can certainly send the agreement, the legal opinion out tomorrow.
Okay.
So that should not be an issue.
I think Mr. Dawson's indicated that he wanted to have a conversation with the attorney at their expense for initial conversation with him. And
Yes, similar to the way I worked in St. George, we had, the St. George Association is part town and part private property. So it's a combination, and the town and the association had shared the expense on that work, but we had agreed to start at a certain amount to see where it would go. So I think if I had Dave's notes, it would give me a really clear idea of what could go forward. And I think maybe 2 hours of his time would be pretty clear. And I don't see any issue with us paying for 2 hours of his time to start, just to get a feel for this. If I see his opinion and there's a lot of questions, maybe I wouldn't even go further. I'd say to the board, look, at this looks like our board. This doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. Or I would at least have a way to say, let's spend 2 hours. Let's spend 2 hours of Dave's time to get some feedback. And then I think at that point, he could maybe give us a firmer estimate of crafting the exact, agreement. That's my guess. So based on past experience.
so Rick, perhaps if you were to contact the attorney and tell him what to expect, and that the bills right now would be picked up by Oak Hill Estates, that would clear the way for everything to proceed at this point.
Yeah, I think Tyler and I can work out some of the details once he has a chance to look at the legal opinion. That he'll get some better sense, as he said, and then we can work out the details past that point.
Sure. So I think we probably are not in need of a motion tonight for going forward, but we will be probably discussing this again.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Good
luck.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So now we're at the point where we're talking about the Lake Iroquois herbicide treatment, and we have at least 3 people that want to talk to begin with. And the first person is from the Department of Environmental Conservation, Misha Kettner. And if Misha is on the line, he's going to talk a little bit about the process of the application that's been submitted for review and possible granting of the permit.
And Misha, I just promoted you to a panelist, so you can unmute, you can share your video as well if you'd like.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for inviting me to this meeting. Jeff, nice to see you.
Good seeing you.
Been
a while.
It has been.
Yeah. You notice I haven't gotten a haircut.
Yeah, well, you notice I'm pretty buzzed. Did it myself. So my role in this is I oversee the Lakes and Ponds Regulatory Program, and I specifically oversee all aquatic nuisance control permit applications. So broadly, if anyone is looking to pursue a project in waters of the state that controls an aquatic nuisance, you'll likely need a permit through the DEC. So for this project proposed in Lake Iroquois, it's proposing to use an herbicide, which does require a permit. And in order to issue a permit, there's 5 findings that need to be made. I'll just quickly go over those 5 findings. First one is that there's no reasonable non-chemical alternative. Second is that there's an acceptable risk to non-target environment. Third is that there's a negligible risk to public health. 4 is that there's a long-range management plan that has been developed, which incorporates a schedule of pesticide minimization. And 5 is that there's a public benefit to be achieved from the application of a pesticide. So when an application is submitted to the DEC, I get the application, it goes through an administrative review process, and once I've had a look at it, I send it out to various other internal experts within the state. So as a straightforward example, in order to assist the Lakes and Ponds program to make a determination on whether or not there's a negligible risk to public health, these applications go over to the Department of Health. And so Sarah Vos from the Department of Health, she reviews aquatic nuisance control applications that are applying for pesticides. So she reviewed this application, sent me comments, and then I incorporate those comments into a final decision. And so with this project, she was able to conclude that there's a negligible risk to public health. So she's an expert in that field, and that's what was incorporated into the draft permit. So once that internal review process is completed, I take that information from those various experts, and a decision is drafted, and it goes out to public notice, which is the stage that we're currently at. The public notice period ends on June 3rd, and there's a public informational meeting next Wednesday, the 27th, from 4:30 to 6:30, where folks from the public are welcome to sign on. It's a Microsoft Teams meeting. Try to manage it as best as possible. It's a bit different from Zoom. Zoom seems to have some functionality that Teams does not have, but that's what we have available at this date. In that meeting, the purpose will be to explain that project in greater detail, and then to allow for public comments and questions. And during that public meeting, and all throughout the public comment period, questions or comments will be formally addressed in a final response summary, which that response summary is then issued in the final decision.
And so the comments that we have received as a select board, I'm not sure if you've received all of those or not. If we were to forward those to you, would that be part of the public comment process?
Yep. Yeah. So if you sent comments on the project to me now, yes, those could be viewed as official public comments, and then those would be addressed in the response summary.
Any idea of the time frame for getting the final comments done? Months?
Yeah. So the comment period ends on June 3rd. It really depends on the amount of work that goes into responding to the comments. So I really don't know off the top of my head what time frame that will be completed in, but I try to address them as quickly as I can.
Of course.
So Terry, I was negligent in raising this before. Misha and I work for the same agency, same department, different divisions, and I believe our work has essentially no overlap. To say it's absolutely no overlap would be hard to prove, but essentially no overlap. But there is the potential for there to be a conflict of interest that I'm raising, and looking for you and the board to help advise me about whether you think I am appropriate to weigh in on this issue, or if I should basically sit in the audience.
Well, I think that at the present time, you have no conflict. If there should come a time when you would have to weigh in on something that affects the permit, then I would expect that at that point you would have to recuse yourself.
Okay. And please, if you at all feel that I'm starting to get close to that and I'm not going to stop, let me know.
Thanks. Yeah. So are there other questions from the board for Misha?
So at this point, Misha, there's a draft permit out there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that at all indicate the yours or the department's position about whether the permit should be issued or not? Or does it just mean if there was a permit to be issued, this is what it would look like? We haven't decided whether it should be issued or not.
So currently the public notice period is occurring for the draft permit, which is approving the project. So currently all 5 findings can be made based on the technical information that we have. So currently, yes, it's on track to be approved. Okay.
One of the questions that we're getting many questions or comments. Some of them have to do with public health. Others have to do with other aspects of maybe water quality or biota. So I guess my question is along the lines of, in addition to the Department of Health, who else? You said you reach out to the various experts in the state. Who else would you reach out to advise you on how to draft the permit?
Yes. So the group of folks that gets pinged for these types of applications, it's the regional fisheries biologists, it's state botanist Bob Pop, and then within DEC, specifically to review toxicity to the non-target aquatic biota. We have Rick Levy. He created a memo on this project. Rick Levy, he's on the Vermont Pesticide Advisory Committee. So he's pretty knowledgeable in this field. So yeah, the fisheries biologist and Department of Fish and Wildlife, some other folks within DEC, wetlands biologists. It's really whatever the water body may overlap with and what non-target environment comes into play. So if a treatment area is within a wetland, I want to make sure that the wetlands program has a chance to weigh in on that project. If a project proposes to control aquatic plants, that's going to have an impact on fish species. So I want to make sure the fisheries biologists weigh in. So it's various experts within the state that would be knowledgeable as to how a project would potentially impact a certain finding.
Okay. And I guess one of the concepts out there is that we really ought to be focusing on the non-chemical, non-herbicide approaches to controlling Eurasian milfoil. But one of the findings, at least in the draft permit, would be that there is no reasonable non-chemical alternatives available.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that finding? What it was that caused you or the department to make that finding?
Yeah. So if you notice with the 5 findings, some of the language used, negligible, acceptable.
Yeah.
They're fairly subjective terms.
Yes.
So that makes that makes it
your life
challenging.
easier.
Yeah, you got it. So for that particular finding, no reasonable non-chemical alternative available. So in the draft permit, in the findings, it really tries to outline how the department came about to say what is reasonable. So I think I saw that the draft permit was a part of the materials for this meeting.
Yes.
It's finding number 5. There's a bit there, but it's really trying to define a baseline as to saying what's acceptable or like what's reasonable. And so the final conclusion that was made is saying that yes, overall this approach to try to address a well-established population of Eurasian watermilfoil, while there are non-chemical controls occurring in that water body and have been, this is a approach that can be used, and that it's to achieve what the applicant is looking to get. I would encourage folks to read the finding. It's hard to explain on the spot.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
that's
my the subjective nature of the. It's there. I tried to put a lot in the findings to really clarify, just what the baseline set of review is.
Okay.
So I hope that helps get at it. But I'd really encourage folks to really read the findings. It does try to establish what is considered reasonable or what is negligible or acceptable.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Yeah. Now we'll move on to the next presenter, and the commission is going to stay on the line and listen to what's happening during the course of the meeting. So we have a representative from Lake Iroquois Association, Pat Sousa, I believe, is on the line as well.
I've also promoted Jeff Davis from the Lake Iroquois Recreation District.
Jeff Davis, okay. Okay.
And Misha, I'm just going to mute you for right now.
Sounds good.
They're with us momentarily, Terry.
Sure.
Unmute video. There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Here I am. Thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. So Chris Conan is our president. He wasn't able to make it tonight. I'm secretary of the board and past president of the board. So I'm going to do a brief presentation. Eric said I had about 10 minutes, so I am going to talk a little bit fast. So this is just a very brief overview. All of the details are in our plan. I think you had that in your meeting packet. I realize that's about 100 pages. The draft permit, and then there's additional documentation on our website. So I know there's a lot of detail and stuff that I'm not going to be able to address, but I'll try to do my best to give you at least an idea of an overview of the plan. So I'm just going to, whoops, wait a minute. Sorry. I need to share my screen. And I think this is the one. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. And I'm hoping you can see this. There we go. Okay. So as I said, this is going to be a brief overview. And I'm going to try to time myself. So the overall problem is Eurasian watermilfoil. It was first detected in Lake Iroquois in 1990. We began doing regular aquatic plant surveys in 2014. We've done several of them. I'm not listing all of them here, but you can find them on our website. 2014, we found 70 acres of the lake, was infested. By 2019, we found 86 acres. We also found that we have lost native species from 1984 to 2019. We had a 28% decline in native species. And you can see the picture down here from this past August of the milfoil, the matting, on the surface. So why is it a problem? It's difficult to eradicate. It isn't invasive. It has no natural predators. It was introduced into our waters by human action, and there's no particular natural controls in our environment. It does damage and disrupt natural ecosystems by squeezing out native plants, which are crucial to provide food and habitat for native animals and insects in the aquatic environment. And as it affects that food web, it also affects not only the aquatic species, it affects birds, amphibians, mammals, and so forth that might depend on the water body. As you saw, it forms dense mats on the surface. You saw that from the picture, which impede recreational use. We have had not cyano growth, but we have had algal growth on that surface, and it will eventually affect property values. We've seen that happen in other parts of the state, St. Albans Bay area, for example, where property values have been driving down because of the milfoil infestation up there. So that's part of why it's a problem. In addition, it is considered a stressor by the state of Vermont on the surface waters of the state. And managing the stressor is part of meeting one of the goals of the Vermont surface water management strategy. So, we're working on that. In addition, we do have to remember that we are in a fairly highly populated area. People are come in with their boats. They take their boats out of our water body, potentially carrying our invasive elsewhere. And although we have a greeter program, our greeters aren't on duty 24/7, but the fishing access is open 24/7. So boats can come in and out when the greeters aren't there. Okay, so this next slide shows you the incidence of milfoil. This is from our 2019, this is September 2019. The densest areas are where you see red. And you see in the other colors also show milfoil incidence. So the densest area is in the north end of the lake. That's the Williston end where the beach is and the fishing access. And that is the area that we're planning to treat. So a question comes up, what has LIA been doing about this? Because as Misha mentioned, the expectation is that there is an integrated plan, and the LIA has been working for a number of years on this problem, along with a number of other water quality issues. We do use benthic mats, bottom barriers, in certain areas. We do have been using diver-assisted suction harvesting. We're now proposing to use this new herbicide Prasad. In addition, we have the greeter program, a pressurized hot water boat wash station, which we run every year. We are continuing to work on reduction of nutrients and sediment runoff. And we're proud to say we've had a significant decrease in nutrient content in the lake, one of the few lakes in Vermont to be showing a decrease there. We continue to work on educating lakefront property owners and on best practices, and in-lake and tributary monitoring so that we can understand where the nutrients are coming from. Although this year, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that because of the pandemic. The state funding for the monitoring is apparently not going to be available. I will say there are problems with all of these methods. I mean, there's no perfect method. And so we try to work on using a combination that is balanced. So why an herbicide? As I said, there's no perfect answer. No one answer works. If we really need a combination, we need an integrated program. The bottom barriers can only be used in very limited areas. They kill everything. Everything underneath them is dead. And it doesn't make sense. You can't line the whole lake bottom. That would make no sense. You'd kill the lake. And they have to be moved in and out. And so that becomes complicated. So we do use them in certain areas, like at the boat access area, so that the boats don't move, to kind of keep them from moving through any stands of milfoil, and so they don't break it up. Diver-assisted suction harvesting, a lot of people say, why don't you use more of that? Well, it's $6,000 an acre. It takes about a week for the boat to do 1 acre because the milfoil is so dense. Diverse suction harvesting really works best on smaller areas. And part of the reason of using herbicide is to get the densest areas under control so we can bring in a dash boat that can actually make a difference. If we do the acres, even the acres that we're planning to treat with the herbicide this year, 40 acres at $6,000 an acre would be $250,000, not anywhere near feasible. Reduction of nutrient levels, we continue to work on that. First of all, it's slow. Secondly, there will always be nutrients in the lake, and as long as there has to be, because the native aquatic species need nutrients in the lake, and it comes naturally through natural vegetation dying coming into the lake. Our aim is to reduce, if possible, eliminate human-caused nutrient levels in the lake, but there will always be nutrient levels. And when you have a very aggressive invasive that has no natural predators, no natural controls, it will take advantage of those nutrients. It outcompetes the natives. So as long as there's any nutrients, and there's milfoil is going to be growing. So we can reduce nutrient levels, but we can't go to zero, and so it's not going to make the milfoil go away. Herbicide provides the ability to reduce enough to gain control, and that's what we're aiming for. Not full eradication, but gain control, and then we can use these other methods. Is Prasad safe? Well, the findings, as Misha has already pointed out, the findings by the state suggest that. We will be using it at extremely low concentrations, 3 prescription dose units PDU, which is about equal to 1.93 parts per billion. The Vermont Department of Health says it poses negligible risk to public health, and you have the rest of the findings in the draft permit. It shows no adverse impact, doesn't cause cancer, genetic mutations, and so forth. It dissipates quickly, and it has been used successfully in other Vermont lakes. And I will add, and Misha didn't say this, but the state of Vermont is very particular about what it will allow to be used. Other states have many other herbicides that they would permit in the water. The state of Vermont does not. They're very, very careful in terms of examining these. Okay, so I'll just quickly move on. Misha's already talked about the permit process. I will just say we filed this permit application March 3rd. We're now in, as he said, in the comment period. We have been doing all the notifications so everybody is aware of the permit being filed, and they're aware of the public meeting next week. We've notified our entire mailing list of that. Other requirements within the permit will require us to provide drinking water to those households that draw their water from the treated water body, which we will be doing. And we will be doing a post-treatment aquatic plant survey in September. And that's all assuming that we have treatment this year, which is not guaranteed. Okay, this is the treatment area, which is that black area. And that is the north part of the lake. That's the densest area. And as I mentioned before, as you saw on the map that showed from the plant survey, it showed where the densest areas are. It's for the beach, the fishing access, and so forth. And that's the plan. The pink around the lake shows where the wetlands are, and you can see that it's not affecting any of the wetlands in the area. Estimated cost. So for this year, assuming that if we did treatment this year, we were looking at approximately a total of $62,500 for this year. That includes the water testing that we have to do immediately post-treatment. That includes plant survey and so forth. It's not clear whether we would use herbicide in year 2. That depends on the post-treatment plant survey, but it's possible that that would happen. And so we do account for that. And the full information on our website. We have all of this documentation posted, lots of information. I don't know if this will go to the website, but there it is. There's the website. And right here, 2020 Milfoil Control Effort Program details, and all of the documentation is there, an explanation of the plan, in detail, the permit application, draft permit, and so forth. So I encourage people to take a look at the details of that. And that is the end. I think I hit just about hit 20 minutes.
It's been very good.
Sorry it was so fast. I know. I was like talking a mile a minute. Sorry about that.
Did very well. Thank you. Before we sign you off, I've got questions from the board regarding the presentation. Jeff, it looks like you're talking, but
Sorry about that. Jeff Ayers here.
Hi, Jeff.
One question. Hopefully this won't take you 20 minutes to answer.
Try not.
But if the answer is no, you cannot use this herbicide, what does that mean?
Well, it's difficult. It's difficult to know what to do. We'll probably have to discuss potentially bringing in the dash boat again to at least try to keep things like the boat access area clear. We've tried to keep it a little bit clear around the beach area, the places where there's a lot of traffic. It's expensive, as I said, $6,000 a week is a lot. And there's other problems with dash that are not great. When the divers are in the bottom, they're trying to just pull milfoil, but they can't really discriminate. They can't, and visibility becomes problematic. So we'll work on those other options if we have to. We will use the benthic mats where we can. We still have a permit for that. We'll talk with Nisha about, permitting for some of these other things. Some of it depends on when the decision is made, too, what we could do this season.
Okay. From an economic standpoint, the cost of the chemical is not cheap.
No,
$52,000.
Yeah.
The amount of non-chemical treatment you could do for the same $52,000, what would that be able to achieve? Or you might describe it as, what would that be able to not achieve?
Our feeling at this point is that we would not be able to get it adequately under control, that we would keep chipping away at it, but it's spreading faster than we can keep up with it is the problem. And we bring in, we hire a boat to come in and do the suction harvesting, and we can't get them for the whole summer here. They have other jobs. And even if we had them on for the whole summer, we'd be talking about, maybe 10 acres. Whereas we're talking about treating about 40 acres and hoping to get the worst of it under control. And it would cost close to the same. So we'd get a quarter of what we could do with the herbicide for that money. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
any further questions? If not, then we'll move on to the next presenter. David Kaminsky, I believe, is going to be giving a presentation from the opposition.
Yep, I'll get that here one second, Terry. We also had Jeff Davis on the line too. I didn't know if he had any statement you want to make for the recreation.
No, a statement to make. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Jeff.
All right, there's the video. All right. I am on the LIA board. I'm also the Heinsberg representative for the Lake Iroquois Recreational District. And so just briefly about the beach, we have seen a pretty rapid decline in beach sales through the years, and especially in July and August. People come to the beach, and because of the milfoil, it's choking the area that they can swim going off the end of out from the beach. And the smell is creating a problem. Pat didn't mention that. I don't think anybody mentioned the smell of milfoil, especially in July, August, and September. And, so that's been a struggle for us. We've been losing money for the last several years. And luckily, previous years, we have being able to put a little money away, so we've been able to pay the bills. Right now, because of the virus, we aren't sure when we're going to open up this year. Certainly not Memorial Day when we typically open up. So stay tuned. We're hoping, was it June 25th, the parks, I believe, are supposed to open up. So that would be a green light for us. As you may know, students or younger folks are at the gate, and we're a little concerned about social distancing, and to ask a younger person to try to police that could be difficult. So there's some challenges for us this year, especially both financially and obviously with the pandemic. So in the past, Pat mentioned water runoff. We've had some projects that have been completed at the beach. We had water runoff coming from the parking lot, eroding the beach and contaminating. The runoff contaminates the lake, and a grant with LIA and LIRD, we're able to pay for that a couple of years to put in storm drainage control program. We've also had an engineer design improvements to BB Lane. That design is complete. If we can find a grant to pay for some of it, it's over $200,000 to fix BB Lane, which is a big contributor to water or stormwater runoff. So those are some of the things that we've done to try to improve the water runoff in the area of the beach. Some of the challenges we have moving forward, trying to be profitable, and I think that the problem with the milfoil is contributing to people wanting to come to the beach and want to swim. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Jeff. I think you've given us a good overview of the problems that exist at the beach. And so thank you.
So Pat and Jeff, I'm going to move you back to attendee for the meeting, and I'll get David moved up to a presenter here in just a moment. I see David's on the line, so it will just be a moment here.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
We can. Thank you. Welcome to the Select Board meeting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. I'm going to also go through a brief slide presentation. So let me just share the screen with you. Okay, can everyone see the slides okay?
Yes.
Okay. Again, thanks so much for inviting me. My name is David Kaminsky. I'm a resident of Hyamsburg, but I did live in Williston for many years. We raised our children there, who went to the central school and so forth. We live on the lake now in Hyamsburg. I'm also a physician, and when I'm not working in the intensive care unit, one of my jobs is to do research and teaching, and part of that entails doing a lot of critical grant reviews and grant writing and paper reviews and so forth. And so it's with that background in mind that I have put together a presentation to try to show the other side of the story and why I think the permit to use fluoroperoxyfen benzyl in Lake Iroquois should be denied. And I'm appealing to the Williston Selectboard, as we've done to the Hyamsburg Selectboard, to think about, as a select board, writing a letter to the state during the public opinion period to deny the permit. Why am I saying this? There's no evidence yet that this chemical is safe, either in humans or animals or for the environment, and I'll go through that in a second. The benefit of the herbicide, in my opinion, does not outweigh the risk, and I'll show you some of the evidence for that as well. There's no written plan of action with specific details on how the permit is going to monitor the situation and act on its findings. There's no written plan for the monitoring of the effects of the herbicide itself. The herbicide is not a cost-effective solution. We've just heard that it will cost $250,000. Well, that's how much the suction harvesting might cost too, to get the equivalent amount. And we can talk about that later. Regarding the first point, every time I say to someone the chemical has not been proven to be safe, the reply is always, but the EPA says it's safe. And if you read the Department of Health statement, they say it's safe because the EPA says it's safe. Well, where do the data come from? There are no data in humans. Usually there aren't for chemicals. The data come from animals. And if you look carefully, most of the data in most studies and in total for this chemical come from the chemical industry, not independent peer-reviewed studies. If you look across the board, animal data and human data only agree about 70% of the time. So it's questionable whether we should be relying on animals at all. You may remember the drug thalidomide that was found to be 100% safe in animals. Now tell that to some mother whose child was born with no limbs. The EPA approved this chemical under the current administration. And I don't need to remind anyone what the current administration is doing with industry advocates who are trying to roll back a lot of chemical regulations. Finally, it's been said that this chemical was a huge success in the 4 lakes to which it was applied last year. That was only 1 year ago. We have no idea if it's a success. It might have killed the weeds, but we really need to think about the big picture, the safety for animals, for humans, and the environment. Do we really want to be part of this experiment by putting in the chemical in our own lake? Now, what about risk versus benefits? People say, well, the milfoil is dangerous. There was a dramatic article in the Hyamsburg Citizen that called it the horror of Hyamsburg. I feel that's way overblown. Yes, it's completely annoying. I hate it as much as everyone else does, but I would argue it's not dangerous. It is a nuisance. It does cause problems. If we get rid of it, there will be some benefits for sure. Improved boating and more native plant growth. But there are a number of risks to consider. I've already mentioned the short and long-term human health risks. We have to think about toxic effects to other plants in the environment as well. We have to think about the development of resistance with repeated use, and we have to worry about the development of toxic algae blooms that can occur after herbicide application. But to me, this is the most important thing. We're not talking about considering whether to take a pill. If you have a medical condition, the doctor offers you a treatment. Every drug has benefits and risks. There's no such thing as a 100% safe medication. And you make the decision to take that drug based on your own personal measure of benefit versus risk. And that affects only you. If there's a risk, it affects only you. You've made your informed decision. When it comes to putting herbicide into the lake, which is a public resource and a natural body of water, we have to consider the risk to benefit ratio in everyone and to the lake itself. The decision to use this chemical affects even those who would not choose to take the risk. So people who swim in the lake, including children, will be exposed to the risk even though they chose not to take it, as if they had been given the choice to take a medication. And likewise, this decision to use it affects the natural lake community, again, with no say in the matter. So I really think the benefit versus risk calculation has to be considered in light of public health and a natural resource. If you look at the data safety sheets for the chemical, it says it's practically non-toxic to fish. And what fish did they use? Carp. Carp are known to be highly resistant to a lot of toxic effects. It's slightly toxic to aquatic invertebrates. Remember, these are data given by the industry to the EPA, and they're not 100% safe. There is some toxicity involved. Bob Popp was mentioned earlier tonight, and he's a plant biologist. When he was looking at Lake Hortonia and Burr Pond, which is one of the 4 lakes where, quote unquote, the herbicide's been a great success so far, he was worried that it's causing, that any herbicide causes a decline in biodiversity and maybe eliminating some plants. And he felt that a survey done after the last year of the use of Renovate showed that up to 12 native plants had disappeared. So these herbicides have an effect on the ecology of the lake. What about the biodegradation? We were told it won't last long in the water, that there are no cumulative impacts. Somehow this figure of 1.68 hours is cited in the application. But if you look at the safety data sheet, it's expected to biodegrade, quote, very slowly in the environment. And if you look carefully at a pH of 7, which is what the pH of Lake Iroquois is, it takes 111 days for half of this substance to decay away. That's nowhere near the 1 day that's being cited. Also, it's been said in the permit application that there's no additional risk for an algae bloom. Well, the DEC itself said in response to the sonar application, which was denied in 2018, that this drop in aquatic plant density does have the potential to result in more available phosphorus within the lake that could then readily be utilized by algae and result in unintended algae blooms. So this is a definite concern. Let's take Lake Maury. Lake Maury is another one of the 4 lakes with a miraculous response to this chemical applied last year. Well, in fact, at the end of 2018, when Renovate finished 5 years worth of application, quote, many were alarmed when our lake was invaded by a foul-smelling algae bloom, and it kept dogs and people away and out of the water. I want to argue that the permit does not give us detailed plans for non-toxic control. Pat mentioned all the things that the Lake Iroquois Association has been involved in for many years, but I argue that this list doesn't really speak to the type of discrete actions and plans regarding personnel, money, time, and specific plans on how each of these will be tackled. These details really matter. For example, if the water is found to be contaminated and water has to be supplied to people on the lake, how is this going to happen? And what if it takes more than 24 hours to dissipate? And how are the households going to be identified? And how will the water be paid for, et cetera? We need to monitor the effects of the chemical. The permit application says we will conduct plant surveys in the fall, but surveying plants is just but one aspect of monitoring. Again, as I've stated, I think there needs to be surveys on the effects on animals, on fish, invertebrates, and the microbiology of the lake as well. We need to monitor the chemical levels to make sure they're below the 2 parts per billion that was cited, and we need to monitor for the growth of cyanobacteria. None of this was listed in the monitoring plan in the permit. The permit starts off by agreeing that there are rare, threatened, endangered species in the water body. That application was checked yes in that question, and yet nothing in the application about how these rare, threatened, or endangered species will be monitored. I even ask, is it appropriate to use this chemical in Lake Iroquois? Notice that the specimen label says it should be used in waters with little or no continuous outflow. Well, let's take a look at the map of Lake Iroquois that Pat showed us before. The lake, as we all know, flows from north to south. There's a dam at the south end, and it's rushing at certain times of year, and it's trickling at other times of year. But on average, a water survey that was done in 1985, granted these are old data, showed that we have somewhere in the order of 500 to 700 times 10 to the 4th cubic meters flow of water out of the lake. And that translates, I did a little math, that translates to 4.5 million gallons per day. I would not call that a static lake. Why is this of concern? Because again, the chemical will be applied at the northern end of the lake in the so-called littoral zone. And where's it going to flow? It's going to flow southward and therefore affect the entire lake. In addition, the DEC has said that the chemical can only be applied to 40% of the littoral zone. That's the zone where sunlight reaches and the weeds can grow, so that it doesn't excessively damage the rest of the natural ecology of the lake. But if you think about this 40%, this is all in one big patch, one area where there's a sort of unique ecosystem, because the rest of the littoral zone, which is along the edges of the lake here, as shown by the dotted line, that's where development has occurred. This is one of the few undeveloped areas. So I wonder if 40% is really going to be enough. Consider that Minnesota sets this limit at only 15%. This particular 40%, as I say, could result in a lot of ecological damage since it's all concentrated in one area. Would it be better perhaps to choose 40% as a summation of many smaller isolated areas in other parts of the littoral zone? Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the cost effectiveness of the plan. This has already been spoken to a bit. We just heard that the chemical may be applied in years 1 and possibly in year 2, maybe thereafter. If you add up in that chart the total cost of the chemical over 5 years, plus the other things that will be happening, it comes to $200,000, almost that $250,000 that was cited before. We don't know what's going to happen in years 4 and 5. And the milfoil, everyone agrees, can never be eradicated. So there's really no end to this spending. And I would like to suggest that instead we do spend the money on non-toxic means to try to control the milfoil and especially target the root causes of its existence. No pun intended there. So shoreline erosion and soil runoff, improving shoreline buffers, and educating people about motorboat activity. You've seen this chart before. I won't dwell on it, but just say that the suction harvesting is only allocated 15,000 in year 3. That's 2 acres and 2 weeks of time. 6,000 in year 4, 6,000 in year 5, 1 acre each. Why do I bring that up? Because the permit denial, again, for sonar in 2018 said that all reasonable non-chemical actions at that time had not been pursued. And what we're seeing here is nothing more than had been pursued previously. I want to suggest that the herbicide use could be seen as a last resort, but not until we've done a lot more to try to exhaust non-toxic means. Here's the report from Lake Dunmore. Lake Dunmore has had an herbicide problem since '89. They initially hired 2 divers to work all summer. That went up to 5 divers by '99. They eventually invested in a suction harvester, then 2 of them, then 4 of them. At one point, 17 crew members working 240 hours a week. It was only then that they finally did some spot treatments with herbicide in 2016. Interestingly, if you look at their results, whether it be the number of locations on the left or the total milfoil abundance on the right, in 2015, there was a lot of milfoil. The herbicide killed it. They did suction harvesting in 2017, but look what happened in 2018. It came right back. This means an endless cycle of potential use of herbicide and substantial costs. What about that 4th lake we heard about, Lake St. Catherine? Well, Lake St. Catherine is using a combination of DASH that we heard about and spot herbicide, but look at their plans. In 2019, we plan to treat 38 acres with the herbicide and nearly 66 acres with suction harvesting. We at Lake Iroquois are nowhere near that. And so I don't think we can say that we've exhausted the non-toxic means. This is my last piece of evidence. There is a lake in Massachusetts called Lake Buell that for 40, 50 years has been using solely mechanical harvesting to control the milfoil in their lake, and they have never used chemicals. Granted, expensive, but their lake is absolutely stunningly beautiful, a natural environment, and they've never used chemicals in it. So it is possible. So why should the Select Board not support this? I suggest that non-chemical alternatives remain minimally used. There are still unknown risks to non-target environmental issues. There are unknown risks to public health. There's no long-term management plan that specifically minimizes the pesticide use. And in my opinion, the public benefit does not outweigh the risk. But really, I want to say this. Is there any reasonable doubt that this is the right thing to do? And I would say, if you think there is reasonable doubt, and considering that this is a public health and ecological issue, then we urge the Select Board not to support this permit. And I would like to add that there will be a number of comments submitted electronically, as you know, and I'd like the Select Board to take those into consideration as well. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, David. Yes, we've already received a number of comments electronically, and those would be part of the record as well. So yes. So members of the board, do you have any questions for David? Jeff, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say that was a very thorough, well done presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So if there's no other questions for David, we'll move on to people who are waiting to comment on the line.
Can I ask just one question?
Sure.
Maybe I'm out of order. It actually goes back to the Lake Iroquois district. And it just was, the question was, I noticed that they are a co-applicant along with the Lake Iroquois Association. And I'm just wondering what was the rationale for doing that.
So, Jeff, we have Pat on the line still. She's asked to make a comment. Perhaps she could address that.
Sure. Yeah.
When she's back. I'll look to Terry. Pat from the association would like to follow up on some of that, and we also have a number of public comments. What order would you like to take those in?
Let's do Pat first because we have a question.
Okay. Hi, Pat. I've got you just on audio, so you should be able to unmute.
I just unmuted. Yeah, thank you. The LARD is co-applicant. I think Jeff actually explained fairly well the LARD's concerns about the milfoil at the beach, causing, serious problems at that end of the lake. And that is why we are working at that end of the lake because of the beach area, because of the fishing access area. We're also concerned because, as David did mention, some concern about motorboats churning through the milfoil, and that is where that happens, and reducing that density is important. So and we've been working with the LARD also on reducing runoff from the beach area. Jeff mentioned a project we completed a few years ago to reduce that, and we're also working, now there's a stream there at BB Lane, and so we've been working with them fairly closely because that's a problem area of the lake. I also wanted to mention, David was incorrect. I did not say that the herbicide would cost $250,000. I said it would cost that much to do suction harvesting, and we would get about in this dense northern area, and we would get only maybe about 10 acres if we were lucky. Now, the reason why Dash can do about an acre a week for $6,000 is because the milfoil is so dense. So yes, in subsequent years, we're looking at 15,000 or even less, but if the milfoil is not as dense, they can move much more quickly. So we would expect that if we can get the milfoil down to a controllable amount where it's not as dense, we would then be able to get the boat out. They could move much more quickly through much less dense areas, so that for $15,000, we would get more acreage done. So that's why those numbers are that way. And of course, we would determine exactly how that would all work based on the plant surveys. I also would dispute that we don't have a plan. I think the plan is fairly clear. We've laid it out. It is lengthy. We continue to work on it. We do have a plan for distributing water as the permit requires. We have not laid out all the details because it depends on certain things that we cannot determine yet. It depends on if and when the permit is granted. It depends on the date that we could then bring the applicator in. If the permit is granted very late in the season, that is not optimal application time. So it may have to wait till next season. The majority of households on Lake Iroquois are seasonal. So until we know a date, we can't really collect the information because we don't know who will be here, who will be occupying. In addition, we do have a plan. It's laid out in our plan. We will be doing water sampling. But if you look at the concentration level that we would be using, we don't expect that even on the day of application, the concentration level would be anywhere near the level that would require water restrictions. In fact, we would expect it to be less than 1 part per billion on the date of application in the lake. But we will be testing for that, and we do overnight testing, and we would test every day. But we would expect that the first day we would see it down already below 1 part per billion. I think that's all I'll respond to at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions if there's other questions.
So we need to go to some of the other folks that are on the line that wish to make brief comments tonight. It would be helpful to limit your comments. If you have something new to add, we'd be very happy to hear that as well.
So everyone listening at home, I have a list I've put together of folks who reached out to me before the meeting and folks who have indicated in the chat during the meeting. I just want to remind folks that I see some written comments in the chat, and the board's been listening to the presenters so far. So if you would like to address the board tonight, the best way to do it is to do it verbally. So please just indicate to me and I'll get you added to the list. The first person I have is Melinda, and you'll be unmuted momentarily here. There are a lot of people listening, so I just need to go down the list here. And Melinda, you should be unmuted momentarily. Hi, Melinda, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just can you see me on the screen? Because I can't see myself.
We cannot see you, but we can see your name.
I just did audio for ease of time, Melinda, and everyone who's listening at home.
That's fine with me. Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time tonight. My name is Melinda Petter. I'm a resident of Williston, and over the past several decades, I have been in the lake many, many times. My comment will only take a little over 3 minutes, so thank you for your patience here. We collectively built a dam which flooded a marsh north of Hyamsburg Pond, creating the current configuration of Lake Iroquois. Our lake now has a shallow shelf on the north end at a perfect depth for Eurasian Watermilfoil. We have built houses with septic systems right on the shore. We have farmed, allowing agricultural runoff to contaminate the lake. We have transported milfoil into our lake, and we have brought in power boats which stress wildlife, turn up the water, and spread the milfoil. We might not have understood the consequences of our actions at the time long ago, but we have learned. So we have improved these same septic systems, reduced agricultural runoff, upgraded the shoreline, and employed natural measures to control milfoil, and we need to continue. Through all this, nature has adapted to the changes we forced to create the present day conditions. There are nesting loons in our town. There are eagles and shorebirds. Amphibians and fish have prospered. A 2019 plant survey finds hardy native plant populations. We have a beautiful, thriving, natural aquatic ecosystem, although sometimes these natural systems can be messy, smelly, or inconvenient. So while we cannot undo the dam or the houses or the introduction of milfoil, we still can honor this existing and stable natural system. Herbicide application is a dreadful invasive action itself, sometimes referred to as chemical mowing. Its specific stated goal is to kill milfoil, but its subsequent effect will be an extensive and unnatural regime change in the lake. I'm not going to cover details printed on the herbicide manufacturer's data sheet. Instead, at this point, I'm just wondering, who are we to want to inject our lake with a chemical herbicide? Or more simply put, who are we? Are we a community or a town board willing to support an expensive chemical application that will knowingly upend a stable, natural environment, primarily to enhance propeller boat conditions on the lake? Are we short-sighted? Are we insensitive to the multitude of organisms and complex processes currently efficiently operating in the lake by choosing to not consider their well-being? Do we want to be known later on as those caretakers who took it up to the next level by accelerating the development of herbicide-resistant milfoil as we start the lake down a path of chemical herbicide dependence? So who are we? Apparently, you get to decide, or at least get a hand in the deciding. I sure hope it turns out that we, this community, this town board, that we decide that we are responsible conservation stewards. I believe it is our obligation, our mandate, to work only with non-chemical natural control measures as necessary to conserve the thriving, diverse, and stable natural community of Lake Iroquois. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So next I'm going to go to Kathleen Bruce. Kathleen, I'll have you unmuted momentarily here. Kathleen, looks like you may need to unmute yourself on the other end. I can see you here.
Here.
Oh, there we go.
I got it, Jamie. Turn your sound on. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
You're all set.
Okay. I would like to briefly thank everybody for their presentations. I lived in Williston for 27 years, raised my children there. I now live in Hyamsburg and use the lake with my grandchildren. And I have a history of being a healthcare professional. I've been a nurse for 38 years for a maternal child population. I have taken care of children with cancer. I have done many things in my life, but one thing I have really noticed is that the people who use the south end of this lake are mothers and children, period. I do not trust the current EPA, which is pretty much gutted, to tell me that this is a safe chemical. We thought DDT was a safe chemical. We thought thalidomide was a safe chemical. And after being in existence for just a few years and having very little, well, no safety data by any outside source other than the manufacturer of the chemical, that they just are interested in selling it. And I understand that. I think there are more natural ways to do this, and I would not want my grandchildren to be ingesting or being covered in any of this chemical. And I don't believe the onus of burden, the burden of proof here is on those who would like to use this chemical in the lake. It's not on those of us who don't, because those of us who don't have a choice if it gets put on, period. And like David said, which, very well, that it's not something I would choose for my family, and I don't choose it. And I would like you to please take the public health consideration into strong consideration, because this is hits home for me. And I do not believe that there's any safety data to back this up. And I sure as heck wouldn't want to find out later that we made a big mistake. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen, if you're still there, I know your husband, Jamie, was interested.
Yeah, he's right here.
Well. Sure, if you
right
want to hand the phone over to him. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is James Bruce. I'm a retired chemist from IBM. I've many years working there, PhD in chemistry. Couple of comments on concern for safety. I think, one is just the general, things are only as safe as our knowledge to test them. So, like David said, these aren't tested in people. These are tested in animals. Which animals you pick, how you test, how you analyze is all somewhat subjective. And, we don't know the details, therefore, of how that's done and how the industry, therefore, says it's safe. In addition, when they looked at this in Europe, they found concern about, endocrine-mediated mode of action. It's not obvious that there was a problem, but it clearly wasn't vindicating it as being completely safe. So, I treat this as there's a big difference between saying something is absolutely safe and saying, I don't have data to say it's unsafe. And I think there is data saying it's unsafe in this case. Another comment is, if it's so safe, why are we supplying bottled water to houses? It just seems to be incongruity there, that either it's safe and we don't need bottled water, or there's concern about safety. And if there's concern about safety, what's the benefit? At least with DDT, which we know now to be horrible, there was a benefit in killing mosquitoes, which caused malaria, which killed people. I don't see that same level of benefit here. We're talking about this as a convenience. And I guess that's the end of my comments. I could say a lot more. I put stuff into writing as well, but I'll leave it at that.
But thank you. We did get both of your comments electronically as well.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I'll just go down my list here. Meg Handler's next on my list. Meg, I'll unmute you momentarily here. Hi, Meg.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. So I also used to live in Williston, raised my family there, and I now live in a house on Lake Iroquois. I was an early member of the board of the Lake Iroquois Association, and I sat on the board for many years. I did not support the use of herbicides as a means to control nuisance weeds. The LIA board compelled me to step down, and 2 other members of the board were also compelled to step down for the same reason at the same time. I have noticed in the newspapers and various other presentations to the Hyamsburg Selectboard that LIA has been characterizing those of us who oppose the use of Prasad as, quote, emotional rather than logical. I would like to correct that misrepresentation. LIA says that Prasad is completely safe, quote, 0 risk. This is not fact. The fact is that Prasad is a brand new chemical approved in 2018 by the current administration's EPA with next to no testing and no experience in the field. We don't know yet if it will cause harm to humans or animals or fish or microorganisms in the water or soil underneath the lake. These possibilities have never been tested. There is no basis for any absolute claim of safety this early in the process. LIA says that Prasad has been proven to be, quote, incredibly successful. This is not fact. The fact is that only 4 lakes in Vermont have ever applied this chemical, and those 4 lakes only applied it last summer, less than 1 year ago. If success means that Prasad killed the weeds, then maybe it was successful. But that would be a ridiculous measure of success. We don't know yet what will happen even 1 year later. Maybe the weeds will come back stronger than ever. Maybe non-target plants or animals will suffer harm. The State Department of Environmental Conservation, along with other scientists, tells us that herbicide use degrades the aquatic environment and may increase the prevalence of toxic algae blooms. Right now, we just don't know what will happen. It is simply too soon to tell. LIA says that Lake Iroquois is in terrible shape, that it will, quote, die, that it will, quote, fail. This is not fact. No one can deny that Lake Iroquois has a substantial population of milfoil. But the fact is Lake Iroquois is also a thriving natural community. Lake Iroquois is home to a whole family of loons, eagles, osprey, heron, kingfishers, turtles, amphibians, and fish. Somehow, despite the milfoil, Lake Iroquois has good water quality and a robust variety of native plants. These facts are demonstrated by the 2019 Darren Freshwater Institute survey undertaken at the request of LIA. Lake Iroquois is a complex web of life interacting in ways that we can't begin to understand. LIA can disrupt this natural balance in 1 single day of chemical herbicide application. LIA says the Prasad will solve the milfoil problem. This is not fact. The fact is the Prasad has the potential, like any herbicide, to make things considerably worse. Herbicides degrade the ecological condition of lakes where they are applied. Herbicides are known to cause toxic algae blooms. The State Department of Environmental Conservation and other scientific researchers agree about this. While LIA expects a good outcome and is optimistic about the outcome, this is not fact. This is hope. LIA says that applying chemical herbicide is the only way to, quote, save the lake. This is not fact. The fact is that chemical herbicides are no magic bullet, no easy fix. The fact is, there is no simple solution to the problem of weeds. Any gardener can tell you this is true. Whatever method you choose, weeds grow back. Herbicides are no different. They are, at best, a temporary measure with a lot of ecological costs. Again, take a look at the 4 lakes that LIA points to as success stories for Procelicor. All 4 lakes have been applying herbicides over and over for years. Somehow the milfoil always grows back. Herbicides breed resistance. Plants figure out a workaround and just come back stronger than ever. Lake communities using chemical herbicides also rely on a considerable amount of harvesting. And this is the crux of the matter. LIA has never fully committed to a genuine, sustained course of physical or mechanical harvesting. LIA has dabbled in harvesting. 2 weeks of suction harvesting in 2018 and 1 single week in 2019. LIA managed to harvest a total of 3 acres over the past 2 years. Compare that to Lake St. Catherine, one of the 4 model lakes that LIA keeps referencing. Lake St. Catherine aims to complete over 65 acres of suction harvesting alongside its Procelicor treatment. LIA must first demonstrate its commitment to harvesting before it can even begin to consider the option of chemical intervention. LIA says that herbicides are more cost-effective than physical or mechanical harvesting. This is not fact. The fact is that you can't compare herbicides to harvesting simply on a per acre basis. You need to look at the total cost of the project. If herbicides are to be used, they must be employed as a supplement to harvesting. Constant exclusive herbicide use is not acceptable. Scientists agree that this would be ruinous to the lake. Any herbicide project must include a substantial cost for harvesting and needs to be compared to other methods with that additional cost in mind. Finally, LIA says that it will be able to raise over $200,000 to fund this project over the next 5 years. This is not fact. The fact is that LIA is a tiny, informal organization that has never successfully raised anywhere close to this amount of money before. The Procelicor permit application does not require proof of funds as a condition of the permit. What happens if LIA raises enough money initially to apply the chemical herbicide in the first year, but then fails to raise the remaining funds to complete the project? What happens if LIA raises enough money for the chemical portion of the treatment, but then fails to raise enough money for the non-chemical portion of the work? What happens if critical members of the board suddenly step away mid-project, leaving no one with the energy and drive to complete the planned mitigation? LIA is a small organization. There are only 5 or 6 people truly leading this herbicide effort. Lake Iroquois does not have a strong, cohesive, lake-wide community. It is hard to find volunteers to do anything. Even the annual celebration and meeting seldom attracts more than a handful of people. LIA does not have the institutional depth required to carry out such an ambitious project, especially if critical members decide to retire. There are strong, rational reasons to oppose the injection of any chemical herbicide into Lake Iroquois. Prudence would argue against experimenting with a brand new herbicide in its first few years of use. Please, as a select board, vote to actively oppose Procelicor, a new, inadequately tested herbicide intended to combat a nuisance weed in Lake Iroquois. please come together as a select board to submit a public comment to DEC during this critical comment period so that DEC hears from you that Williston wants safe, sustainable, non-toxic solutions to the problem of nuisance weeds in Lake Iroquois. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. I'll remind folks, if you've already sent something electronically to us and you wish to speak, make it brief and summarize what you sent to us already.
Next, I'm going to go to Robert Hyams. Robert, I'll have you unmuted here in just a moment.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, my name is Robert Hyams. I live in Heinsberg. I have never lived in Williston, but I have shopped there from time to time. I am, through my professional life, I apply herbicide. I'm a licensed commercial applicator, and I apply herbicide for restoration, habitat restoration purposes, terrestrially. I do not apply it to water. But the one thing that I've learned is that an infestation is a result of underlying conditions. And, there are underlying conditions that have created this milfoil situation in Lake Iroquois. And I'm not really sure that anyone has really given enough attention to those things. I mean, they're mentioned, but in specifically, we have a nutrient loading issue in Lake Iroquois. And I guess this is a question for DEC and for Misha. Should there be a target for phosphorus reduction in Lake Iroquois? Because if we had if we address the underlying conditions, then any any control efforts will be that much more successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Francine Pomerance. I'll just get you unmuted momentarily.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm not a resident of Williston. I actually live in Richmond, but I grew up, my kids all swam in Lake Iroquois and learned to swim there, and we still spend our summers a lot on Lake Iroquois. So when I heard about Lake Iroquois Association wanting to put Priscillacor into the lake, I actually emailed a friend who grew up in Richmond. She is now a PhD in environmental toxicology, and I asked her about this chemical. And I would like to read the email response I got from her. Since this is a new compound on the market, there's very few studies on the ecological and human health impacts of Priscillacor. I want to bring up a few points that were red flags to me, and I attached some risk assessment reports as resources of information. Number one, Priscillacor, active ingredient fluorpyroxene benzyl, appears to be originally manufactured as an herbicide for rice farms. If the original intended use was for agriculture and was to primarily be used in highly agricultural areas, then the risk of this herbicide killing non-target species is low, meaning there's not a lot of biodiversity in rice paddies, and therefore it may be less of a chance to accidentally harm important and sensitive species in these dedicated agricultural areas. There's a difference in the application and use of pesticides for agricultural versus urban use. I would characterize the use of Priscillacor in Lake Iroquois as an urban use. Lake Iroquois is a sensitive ecosystem that already suffers from high human recreation activities and heavy mechanical disruption from motorboaters. Although milfoil is highly invasive and is likely choking out and displacing sensitive native species of aquatic plants and bottom-dwelling vertebrates, thus adversely changing the lake ecosystem already, it is pertinent to thoroughly assess the total risks of Priscillicore, killing native plants and algae compared to the ecological damage of leaving the milfoil in place. 2. There's some evidence suggested that Priscillicore may cause endocrine disruption. Endocrine disrupting compounds, EDCs, either mimic natural hormones or interfere with the production and molecular signaling of hormones in the body. In order to register new pesticides in both Europe and the United States, a series of toxicological tests are conducted in mammals, algae, fish, and vertebrates. The studies with male rats, the mammalians used as a proxy for the effects in humans, found that some rats developed tumors in their mammary glands. This is unusual since the mammary glands were the only target of toxicity, and the exact cause of toxicity for these tumors is yet to be determined. Number 3, many ecological toxicity studies, ETOX, do not consider multiple life stages of aquatic species for registration. For example, larvae or juvenile fish or amphibians may be highly susceptible to Priscillicore. And then she says, see page 45 of NOAA USDA report. We don't know yet because it has not been studied. What I do know is that Dow did their fish toxicity study in carp, which are resilient and difficult to kill. But I found a review that says trout are more sensitive to fluorpyroxyphene-benzyl than carp. This is likely the reason that Dow chose to use the toxicity data from carp rather than trout to register their product in the United States. Overall, there is not a lot of ecological and environmental information available that isn't provided by the manufacturers. I would be hesitant to use such a new compound. Wait a minute, I just lost my space. To use a new compound until I knew more about the effects to the entire system, like a lake, and see case studies in other locations that use Priscillicore. It looks like there are several recreation departments and environmental management groups across the country using or planning to use Priscillicore to manage invasive aquatic plants. I would at least wait a few years to see how these ecosystems rebound from Priscillicore application and critically assess the environmental effects in these locations. Priscillicore seems fairly cost-effective, but something to consider is how often this will need to be applied. I did not see any readily apparent information on the efficiency of Priscillicore on different life stages of milfoil, or even if native species were more sensitive in different life stages. So it may need to be applied many times over the next few years. There are so many unknowns here, which I know is not helpful, but with so much uncertainty, I would recommend holding off on using Priscillicore until we know more. To me, it's not worth the risk right now when there are so many people who live downstream, and recreate at Lake Iroquois. So I thought that was, I found it very informative, and it convinced me for sure that I don't want to see Priscillicore used on Lake Iroquois. I will no longer swim there or boat there, I guess, if they do use it. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Could you submit that letter to either DEC or to us?
Yes, I've asked actually the woman who wrote it if she would submit it, and she said she will be submitting it to the DEC and I can send a copy to you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Jack. Jack, I'm going to unmute you, and if you could also state your first and last name when you start making your comment for the record. Thank you. Jack, you may need to hit unmute. Yeah, your talking should be permitted. Jack, are you there? Looks like you may be having a technical difficulty. I'm going to go on to the next person. Maybe we can try Jack again in a few minutes. Next person on my list is Nancy. Nancy, if you're there, I'm going to unmute you, and if also you can state your last name for the record here.
Hi, thanks for taking my comment. My name is Nancy Wright. My husband, Steve Lytle, and I have lived full-time at the south end of the lake near the dam for well over 30 years. We appreciate Lake Iroquois immensely. It's a beautiful natural resource, and we enjoy spending time on the lake and on the shoreline. Steve was the state of Vermont's Lake Iroquois water quality testing volunteer for many years. He followed a protocol to take samples and make other prescribed test observations weekly for the entire summer season. He also served on the board of the Lake Iroquois Association for quite a few years, and he is one of the people that Meg Handler described, that he was basically disinvited from the board when they made clear that whoever was not in favor of chemical treatments should not be a board member. This evening, I want to talk briefly about the role of motorboats. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to get into all that, but other people have talked a little bit about this. When the motorboats, travel in certain areas, the propellers chop up the milfoil. Some of it sinks to the bottom, and those little bits then proliferate. Some also floats on the surface, driven by the wind and the current to the south end dam, where the water exits the lake, and this is where we live. I can attest that in recent years, there have been heavy mats of milfoil, little bits of milfoil, floating on the surface, collecting at the dam spillway. And this occurrence is coincident to a drastic increase in boat traffic on the lake, big motorboat traffic on the lake in more recent years. So during the summer, we go to the spillway, actually with a rake and pitchfork and wheelbarrow, and we skim off these mats and we put them in our compost pile, and it is magic. It makes incredibly wonderful compost. But the fact that all those mats are there is indicative of a problem, that the milfoil is being chopped up and proliferated by the propellers of the motorboats. The Prasad, if it is used, prohibits the composting of the vegetation from the lake. The manufacturer's literature says clearly that treated plants cannot be composted. So one question is, what's going to be done when those little bits float down? And as someone earlier said, I believe it was David Kaminsky, that the half-life in the plants is much, much longer than even the half-life in the water. So who's going to be responsible for that? I don't believe it's addressed at all in the application for the permit. And who's going to clear it away? It's going to sit down here and clog the dam area where many people go swimming. And where will the Lake Iroquois Association or the LIRD put this treated milfoil scrap? because it's got chemical in it, so it can't just be put on the land to degrade by itself. I also understand that a person can't irrigate a garden vegetable garden with the water that has been treated with the Prasad. So that's another issue that I think was not spoken of very much. But the main thing is once the chemicals are in the water, there's no taking them back. So I speak with many others this evening. Why invest in the pesticide use? We all want to use the lake for recreation. Motorboats are exacerbating the milfoil problem. Stricter control of motorboat traffic does not cost money and would help mitigate the spread. And that's one of the many non-chemical measures which could be taken. And LIA, I don't believe, has addressed this sufficiently at all. So that's really what I have to say. As others have asked at the end, I request that the Williston Selectboard strongly consider sending a message to the DEC that the LIA and the LIRD do not speak for the citizenry who use the lake, and that the Select Board does not agree that the Prasad should be permitted at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last person on my list is Sarah Harrington. Sarah, one moment here. I'll get you unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sarah Harrington. I am a homeowner in Hyamsburg on Lake Iroquois in the South End. And I'd like to read you an email that was received from the former chair of the Lake Buell Restoration and Preservation District. Lake Buell is, this was referenced earlier by David. Lake Buell is a lake in Massachusetts, approximately the size of Lake Iroquois. And he writes, "It was a pleasure to speak with you today about how Lake Buell in New Marlborough in Monterey, Mass. has been dealing with its infestation of Eurasian milfoil, which began slowly at first in the 1960s, then became rampantly out of control through the ensuing decades. There is no quick and easy way to eliminate milfoil in our experience. Out of an abundance of caution and concern about unintended consequences to the balance of aquatic life systems and the downstream effect, our deeded property owners have voted strongly against the using of non-native species or herbicides that target milfoil, knowing that lakes are not at all like swimming pools and that the health of a lake, both in the water itself and around it, is complicated and balanced ecological system of fungal, plant, and animal life. We turn to the simplest and most low-impact method, harvesting the weeds. Harvesting milfoil has saved our lake. It did not happen overnight or in a few seasons. It has taken years, decades even, but we have the milfoil at bay by offloading tens of thousands of tons of phosphorus-rich organic matter from the lake, the milfoil, along with redirecting sewage and phosphorus runoff from landscaping. We have seen the return of fish species, native aquatic plant life, and waterfowl to their natural levels from years before. Investing in a harvesting program is not cheap, but neither are chemicals and their management over the long haul. Both approaches require a long-term commitment. There is no one-and-done enterprise. Our lake residents voted against decades of risky chemical treatment in favor of harvesting 30 years ago when our lake was clogged with milfoil and was accelerating rapidly. Now there is still some milfoil, but the water is sparkly clear again. Native species have returned both in and around the lake, and both the fishing, the swimming, and the boating is fun again. We never have any worries about possible health effects to people who love this lake due to unforeseen complications due to herbicides." He closes, "I wish you all the best as you and your lake neighbors navigate your options." So thank you very much. Appreciate all your time this evening.
Thank you for calling.
So that was everyone I had on my comment list here. remind the board we still have Misha on the line from DEC if anyone wants to circle back with him on anything.
Just perhaps if Misha would care to comment about things that they've heard tonight and whether this all of these will be considered by he and his colleagues.
Yeah, so at this point, like we've said before, it is the public comment period. So if you would like what was discussed tonight to be formally addressed by the DEC, please send me an email with these comments in order for them to be officially addressed.
Thank you. Good. I think if there are nobody else on the line, that we'll conclude the comment section of this, and we'll go into deliberation by the board as to whether we wish to do anything at all or remain neutral on the subject.
Terry, I forgot to try to get Jack reconnected here. One more try if you like. Hi, Jack. You should be able to unmute right now. We'll give it one last try here. All right, we've got to move on. So if you have comments, there will be a comment period from DEC next week. Okay, I'll turn back to you, Terry.
He can also send something electronically if he wishes to us as well as to DEC. So, members of the board, how do we proceed after what we've heard tonight? My suggestion is that we take no stand on the permit. We are not a party to the permit at this point. We're not the co-applicant. We've heard significant amount of comment on both sides of the issue, and I know I don't have the expertise to make any decision as to who is right and who's wrong.
Terry, just I want to follow up on one part. When the Lake Iroquois Recreation District decided to become co-applicants, they must have, by vote or by consensus, decided to do that. Do we know the answer? Stated differently, was there any opposition out of the three communities to being a co-applicant? I realize that's just a detail, but I would just like to know the answer if I could.
I don't know the answer. Maybe there's Rick or Eric.
Are you Jeff, the recreation district you're referring to?
Yes. Yes.
Jeff Davis is still on the line. I can see if he's able to answer that.
Okay.
Jeff, I'm going to unmute you to address that point. Jeff, are you there?
You hear me?
Yep.
All right. I can look back at the meeting minutes of the exact date. We made the decision, Lake Iroquois Association, I'm on both boards, right? So we thought because both groups, organizations are working on trying to improve the water quality in the lake. Williston, the town of Williston, thank you, had been a co-applicant with LIA on the previous application. We thought this, it made more sense for the two organizations on the lake to be the co-applicants. LARD is a municipality, and with that we got to submit our permit for free. We did, of the, I think there was only three. There are four communities, St. George's another.
Yes. Yeah.
That representative hasn't attended the meeting very often, but we do have a quorum, and all three of us from Richmond, Heinsberg, and Williston all approved that LIRD would be a co-applicant on the permit.
Okay, good, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Solutions?
There is no solution, Terry. I think we heard that. I guess I'll start. I certainly am not a fan of herbicides. Anybody who's looked at my lawn will know that I choose not to use herbicides on my lawn. I would probably feel the same way if we had a pond on our property. On the other hand, I think you were correct, Terry. We aren't the experts, and DEC is, I don't know if the correct word is to say they're the experts, but certainly they have, they're much more capable of making this decision than I think we are. But more, I guess more what I'm struggling with is, out of hearing all these comments, it really comes down to me as the health of the lake versus the use of the lake. And that's what I'm interested in sort of exploring. And it seems to me that the chemical is more about trying to quickly return the lake to a use, and motorboats seem to be a big part of that. And part of my question becomes well, maybe part of the strategy to help with Eurasian Watermilfoil is to prohibit motor. I'm not advocating for this, but I'm wondering, maybe that's part of what the strategy should be, because it seems like there is some detriment to that. So I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but I'm feeling uncomfortable about the chemical, but I'm not feeling like I'm the one who should be making this call.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, I put this out not as a motion, but as a suggestion that we ask the town manager to forward to DEC all of the information that we have received tonight and at other times during the last couple of weeks to DEC, and to remain neutral on the issue and let the process continue on the way it is, and we'll see what happens with the application.
Terry, do we know that everyone who submitted comments wants them submitted to DEC?
No, we don't. But they're public documents at this point.
Right, but they were submitted to us as part of our process. They weren't submitted to DEC as a public comment. So I'm just wondering if we're taking a leap of faith that all folks want their comments submitted to DEC. I can see where most would, but
yeah,
I'm not sure all would.
Well, I know that at least some of the ones that we got were also submitted to DEC, but I don't know which ones were and which ones weren't. Perhaps a message could go out to those who have given comments to ask if there's any problem with them submitting it to DEC, and if there is, we won't.
Yes. Sorry, Eric and Rick, I don't mean to put work on your plates. I know you already have enough, but I just don't feel comfortable necessarily with us unilaterally forwarding comments to DEC if the commenter may not have known that was going to happen.
If I could make a suggestion, I could follow up with each person who submitted a comment to the select board and direct them to the portal to submit it to DEC.
Even better.
Maybe that's the best option. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So if there's no objections, we can go along with the suggestion and move on to the next part of the agenda.
Quickly, before we do, one of the, as I was reading the comments, and I think I've actually seen this in some of the comments that were submitted to us was the concept of limiting our funding of the Lake Iroquois Association to non-chemical activities. Now, I realize this is not budget season. It's not time to talk about that, but I also just want to recognize that I saw that, and I think it's something we should consider. I'm not at all advocating one way or the other, but we should consider when we do the next budget, including funding of the association.
Well, if the application is approved, we have some money in the projected budget for Lake Iroquois, and we'll have to make that determination when we see what
right,
happens.
we do for this year, for fiscal year 21, but it's after fiscal year 21. Yeah, okay.
Moving along then. Appointments to town boards. We have a list that was provided to us. And Eric, would you just like to give a couple of words?
Thank you, everyone.
This?
Sure. And I'm just, thanks, Misha. I'm just disconnecting you right here.
Yes, thank you very much.
He's a lucky guy.
Sure, Terry. So the board has before it our annual list of reappointments for incumbents to town boards and commissions. And we've reached, as is practice and policy, we've reached out to folks who are up for reappointment. And we looked at our town policy to check attendance records as well and check with staff. Folks on this list, there is no objection to reappointment. For these open positions, they have been advertised on social media, and I'll have an ad running in the Observer this week for folks who wish to serve. You will see that there was an error that we had the constable position listed on your reappointment list. I crossed that out in the hard copy. So I intend is for that to be reflective on the document as not being reappointed, because we did change the charter on that last year before this.
Thank you.
So that's all I have. And Terry, you had mentioned we may need to pull out the health officer from this list and the deputy.
We would need to make a separate motion or part of a motion for the health officer and deputy health officer to recommend appointment to the Commissioner of Health for those. The rest of the names on the list are for appointment by the board.
And the other point, you'll see there's a second motion for the Catamount Community Forest Committee. Joy asked for a discussion from the board on
yes
that role. Thank you.
So we can take up the major list first of all, along with the recommendation to the Commissioner of Health for the 2 health officer positions. So is there a motion? Well, I should ask if there's a discussion or questions or comments first.
Just 2 comments. First of all, Eric, thank you for checking into attendance. That was good to have that information as part of this. And it's quite a list of folks who are willing to continue serving. That's a very good sign. It suggests somebody's doing something right. So thank you to all of them.
Are you looking for a motion?
I'd move to reappoint for another term the individuals currently serving on town and regional boards and commissions who have expressed an interest in continuing their positions as indicated in the report dated May 14, 2020.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have and there's no opponents, so we have passed that. If someone would be willing to make a motion to recommend to the Commissioner of Health the 2 people on the list for the health officer and deputy health officer.
So moved.
Motion made. Do I hear a second?
So seconded.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't have any opposition to that. So moving on to the Catamount position of Catamount Forest Committee. Joy has served on this for a couple of years. 1 year?
1 year.
1 year. And what we've heard is some discussion as to whether anyone else may be interested and serving from the select board on this.
And let me put that in a different way. I am not going to be able to continue serving.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that leaves us with the position vacant at this point, unless another member of the board is willing to serve at this point.
I heard, well, first of all, if I were to volunteer, I do have a conflict. I am a neighbor of the Catamount community. I'm not a neighbor to the forest itself. I am a neighbor to the Jim and Lucy McCullough's property, who sold the property. That became the community forest. But I also, for some reason, and hearing in the back of my head that Ted really wanted. No, I'm not. Just joking there. Gordon, are you interested?
I think it's a worthy cause, but I have said yes too many times lately, and I'm going to respectfully decline.
And Joy, I heard you correct that you're not able to.
Yeah, I am just between travel and everything else. It's a lot.
Yeah. I don't need another volunteer position either. But I would be willing to do this because it's actually something I assume to Joy, it's something I really believe in, this community forest. And so I will be willing to try it for a year.
I can say it wasn't overly onerous, Jeff.
The hard part's going to be getting up to speed. Then once you're up to speed, it's probably not too bad.
And it won't take you long to get up to speed either, because it's still in that beginning.
Okay.
Thank you for taking that. I was hoping it would be you. I just thought you would be a good person for that.
All right, good.
With
Well,
your
thank
background.
you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
We have a volunteer. We need
I moved to appoint Mr. Ferris to represent the select board on the Catamount Community Forest Management Committee for the duration of the current term on the select board. Oh, not actually. He only wants to do it for a year. He doesn't want it for his current term on the select board. Because you just got.
We can.
Well, he can always resign after a year.
Okay.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, then I leave my motion as it was.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second.
During discussion of the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. 34. We have got it. We're up to the manager's report. Rick?
Well, thank you, Terry. It's getting late, so I'm going to skip through a couple items I'd planned to address, but just to mention, the quarterly report is finally done and was in your packets. So if you have any questions, maybe it's best to address them to me offline, and then if it's a bigger matter, we can bring it to the full board's attention.
Okay.
The one issue I did want to mention, because it's timely, is the issue of wearing masks in public, and particularly as it relates to retail establishments. We've already made the decision to require masks for people coming into the town hall, and we've had that in place from day one pretty much, and that will continue for the near future. The governor has been reluctant to mandate this. He's been encouraging people to wear masks, but then more recently he said in a statement that he would continue that position, but would leave it up to towns to decide if they wanted to become more stringent. My understanding is he may be reconsidering that position, but I don't know that for sure. There is the retailers, I think, have mixed views on this. Obviously they're concerned about keeping their customers happy. They also want to maintain a competitive position with their other stores that they compete with. And they also have concerns about the safety and welfare of both their employees and their customers. And so this is the in-between position that we're now in, is creating putting them in an awkward position. And I think some of them, and not all of them, but some of them would like maybe a little bit more clarity. The problem, of course, is we're not quite sure what legal rights we have to do this. Burlington has passed a resolution. It's, I think, fairly symbolic because they have no enforcement mechanism. And there's other issues too. There's some people that, for whatever reason, can't wear masks or find it difficult to wear masks. And there's other people who really don't like going into any establishment where some are wearing masks and some aren't. Anecdotally, I'm also seeing that more and more people are not wearing masks. In fact, I've been to a couple locations, mostly convenience stores, where very few people are wearing masks. And so I'm finding this trend concerning. I think it is setting us up for kind of a possible resurgence of this virus, and that will negatively impact all businesses if that happens. So it's a matter that I bring to your attention. I would say that if the board has interest in this, we should probably schedule this as an agenda item. And I will leave it to your judgment as to whether you want to bring this up before your next meeting or wait until June 2nd.
Well, I'm going to jump in right from the beginning and say, one, I think this is probably very illegal to do. I also think it's very overreaching. It should have been done 8 weeks ago if that's what you were going to do, but to do that now when you're on a low curve is probably not going to stand and be open up for quite a few lawsuits. I also think that you've got a community that, for the most part, is working together and trying to do this. I don't think it's our job to get involved in trying to legislate or put policies out there. Those stores that want that can certainly make that a provision. And it seems that for the most part, people going in, if you're wanting to wear a mask, and the large majority of people do, or at least have respect for the employees that are in the store, I just don't think we need to get involved in this. And I don't think we should be. Burlington, I can see why for a bunch of reasons, but I don't think we're setting a good precedent doing this.
Further comments? I do have a few as well. I think the stores will figure it out as to what their customers want. And I think the customers will figure it out if they go into a store wearing a mask and nobody else is wearing a mask in the store. I think they'll turn around and leave. So I think the combination of the two is will take care of itself. Other comments?
So I guess I'm a little confused about what we're talking about. And what I mean by what we're talking about, are we talking only about requiring stores, or are we talking about public areas? Is that part of the equation of what we're talking about? Does that make sense? Because yes, I share concerns about what it is we can or should require individual retailers to do.
I'm sorry, Jeff, forgive me.
I don't think my understanding is masks are more about an individual from contaminating somebody else than it is about protecting yourself. And the point being is, I think it's really up to the store to determine, or the retailer to determine, thus are masks required or not. I suspect, well, I shouldn't say it's up to the store. But if we're also delving into the public areas, then I'd start to wonder if maybe we do have some responsibility to deal with the mask issue or the social distancing issue. The parks and the public places, in addition to town hall.
This is not an area that I even want to touch. I would be vehemently opposed to this anyway, but I think that that's just wrong. And Phil knows he can't legislate it, which is why he put it on the towns to do it. So you have no teeth to this. So that's the other problem. Why put something in place that you can absolutely not enforce? You're going to have mask police out there?
Well, but isn't the town right now saying you can't go into town hall without a mask?
That is it's a municipal building.
Right.
That's entirely different than saying you can't go on the rec path without a mask.
And maybe that's okay, the rec path, but it's the concept of should we be looking at where masks are required and where they aren't on public?
People are already, that's already there though. So there's no reason for us to make another policy about it. The town, any municipal building, any private store, our office building, for example, our landlord has dictated this is how it's going to be, and he has the right to do it. It's his building. Right. What we do within our own offices, those are our own offices. And I just don't think we need to sit here and start getting into this. It's a micromanaging thing that just really hits me wrong.
Well, I mean, we do have a role in we have a role in trying to protect public health to the degree we think is necessary, and we're doing that in town hall. Why wouldn't we want to consider what other areas of public property we should be requiring certain protocols be met? Maybe above and beyond what the governor's requiring, the governor's orders are requiring. And if that gets a little bit about why I was having trouble with the fireworks is I just don't look at that as that's going to be a safe environment. Thus, we ought not do it. And that's how I feel here is for instance, if there was use of the athletic fields, the community athletic fields, and there are games going on, baseball games, is it okay for them to sit in the dugouts together?
But none of that's happening right now.
But it could.
Until it does, and then the governor gives guidelines at that point. But I don't think we need to be addressing something that's not even happening yet.
Yeah,
I'm here. I guess I'm not seeing
a clear consensus.
Well, what I was looking for is some idea whether this should be put on a future agenda item, and I'm not seeing enough support for that at this point. So I'm ready to move on. But
okay.
All right. The next item is the manager recruitment process. I sent you an raising some questions, because we're getting to the point of starting to narrow the field, the consultant is. And so I just wanted to make sure that you understood the process. And if you wanted to communicate anything to the consultant beyond what they've already indicated to you, then now would be a good time to do that.
I read Rick's email with great interest, and I think the ideas that he presented are ones that we should follow, and follow the logistics of getting other people other than the select board involved in this, but I think it's worth doing. I think he had 3 suggestions, and I agree with all of them.
Okay, I'm pulling up that email right now. Oh, there we are.
I don't exactly remember what I said in my email now, but one of the questions was how much do you want to? How much of the decision process do you want the consultant to do for you? In other words, do you want the consultant to recommend 3 people or in that range, or do you want to interview a larger group and do a second round of interviews? Those are kind of key questions.
Personally, I would like to rely on the expertise of who we've hired to do their stuff and to give us a smaller number of people. I don't know that we as a board have the ability to sit and vet out 6, 7, 8, 9 candidates. And I thought that was kind of the purpose of hiring this consultant.
Yeah.
think there was something in the contract that indicated that they would do the first screen and get it down to some kind of a minimal number of 4 or 5 for us to then interview and then bring that down to the last 1 or 2.
Yeah. I'm not sure what number it should be that we ask them, require them to get it down to. But at some point, and I just don't know what that point is, but at some point, we are going to want to make sure, because they're never going to be able to understand what we see as the value in the candidates that's going to make them the best fit, because they aren't us. They don't know Williston like we know Williston. But what that number is, I don't know, Rick. I'm seeing 5 to 6, and that seems much above that is going to become too onerous for us to.
Right, I agree. I mean, well,
Yeah.
I'm speaking as someone who's gone through this process for department heads.
Yeah.
It's entirely your call. I really shouldn't have any say in this. I can only relate my experience, and I agree that anything more than 5 or 6 would be much too much. And I think you've already made the decision to rely on the consultant to narrow it down, at least at that point. The question is, from his most recent report, it seemed like they were going to narrow it down even further than that, which I was surprised at.
Yeah. Right. It says minimum of 3. And
contract in number 11 says typically we reduce the pool to 3 to 6 semifinalists for local interviews at this juncture of the process.
one thing to take into consideration too is we're already in the middle of, well, beyond the middle of May.
Yeah.
So as much as I would prefer the timing didn't influence decisions like this, it is influenced decisions like this. We don't have a lot of time.
Well, I think you're right. If we're looking to have somebody on board on July 1st, and I'm not sure that that's doable.
I'm not sure it's doable either.
And I would not like to sacrifice the looking at a good number of candidates that we can then vet and figure out who we want for really for the last couple of finalists.
Yeah. You know, here's an not interesting question. Here's a question. Do they have a sense of, is it, hey, we found three candidates have risen that we feel are in a sort of a, what's the right word, league or not league, but, that we comfortably feel have a greater potential for best fitting your needs than the remainder of the field? Or are they more like, well, there's 5 or 6 that really fall into that same group that we feel are about the same? Is that a question we can kind of ask them? Does that question make sense? I mean, for instance, if they're sitting there going, hey, there's 3 candidates that are clearly ahead of everyone else, that would help me feel comfortable, then it should be 3. If they're coming back saying, well, you really got a good large pool of candidates, we're comfortable getting it down to 5 or 6, but no more than that, then that leads me in a somewhat different direction.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a good point. I think maybe someone from the board, perhaps the chair, might want to have a conversation with the consultant about that kind of question. And if you have interest in some of the other points I made, then also that should be communicated to the consultant as well.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should I move on?
Yes.
Okay.
And it sounds like, Terry, maybe we can't do it via, what would be the process in which you would want, before you get input on what it is you're going to relay to Bob Mercer?
We have the two consultants that will be contacting. What I think we would like to ask them to bring this down to no more than 6, and if they think that that's too many, then we can do the top 3. But I think probably the first interviews are going to be by Skype or Zoom or something like that. But for the finalists, we would want them to be in person.
Okay, and good there. But it's also the question of involving others in the interview process.
Yeah.
That Rick was raising as concerns.
Right.
Not concerns. It's just things we may want to consider.
Yeah. And I think those are most appropriate in the final interview.
Yes.
Part of the
Okay, so at this point, Rick, you're saying it's not an issue now. It's just once the field gets even further narrowed. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. Then I misinterpreted. Okay, so sounds like, Terry, you have what you need to talk with Bob.
I think so.
Great. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Yeah.
All right, I'll move on. Final item was not on my written list, but it came in after the report went out, and that is the local option receipts.
Yeah.
And I think you saw my email on that. News is a little bit better than we had expected.
Yeah.
Still not great, but partly because we had the receipts were so strong in the earlier part of this fiscal year. That's going to help offset a little bit some of the losses that we are going to be experiencing over the next few months. Interestingly, too, during that first report anyway, the rooms and meals tax was the hardest hit percentage-wise. But I think it'll be interesting to see how much both of those, the sales tax and rooms and meals, rebound as the economy starts to crank up a little bit. So anyway, it's something obviously we'll be keeping a close eye on, and we've also, staff is continuing to evaluate possible areas where money can be saved in the short run anyway. And the logical, one of the logical areas is in capital projects. The capital projects are all needed. That's why they got approved, but many of them may have to get delayed because of a shortfall in revenue. But those are issues the board can tackle as the new fiscal year approaches and gets underway. Okay. And that's all I had for this evening.
Okay, well, thank you, Rick.
Eric, I don't know if you had anything.
Just a brief comment. You may recall the Trucking Tuesdays event at Adams Farm. I've been working with them through the state to have a modified offering, and they will have some food trucks, but it will be pre-order, carry out, social distancing, all of the requirements. People stay in their car. No alcohol service, no entertainment. So you'll likely see some promotion for that, but it will be under these very strict restrictions until it can occur otherwise. But Kim's been great.
Next week. That starts next week, I believe.
Yep, next Tuesday. Yep. I had a call with them today.
Okay. Well, good luck to them.
Other business, Rick, I think we have a permit to...
Yes, thank you. I had forgotten about that. I'm going to, it's outside consumption permit. And I can share it on the screen here with you momentarily here. Here it is. I think this is, there it is. This is for McGillicuddy's, located in Maple Tree Place. They traditionally do not offer outside consumption. And the main reason they want to offer it now is because they don't have any other options other than takeout, and that probably isn't covering all their bills. I think in Maple Tree Place, the parent company that owns that property has been providing disincentives for outside dining, but I believe they're, at least in the short term, opening things up, realizing that the restaurants are all struggling. So you may see more of these come down the pike, but this is the first one anyway. And staff has no objections.
Okay.
Questions for Rick? If not, a motion is in order.
So moved.
Yeah. We have a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands.
Oh, yeah.
3, 4. Okay. No negative votes. I have one quick thing on other business. H949 is our charter change bill that was introduced on the 20th of May, the day after we had our last select board meeting. It was sent to government operations, who took it up, I think, within the next 2 or 3 days, and they decided at this point not to take it up as it needs too much testimony during the course of the time that they have at the moment. As the session goes along, and hopefully they have more time to work on things like this, they may take it up at that point when they have a chance to get more testimony on it. Is there any other business that we need to take up tonight?
Sorry, something quick. I hope the email that came in from the reporter for Channel 5.
Yeah.
Channel 5 News. Yes. We've already had the discussion tonight. Terry, could you get back? I'm sorry, I don't mean to put more on your plate, but could you get back to the reporter and report what we talked about?
I'll do that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Any other business?
That's it.
If not,
Good night, everyone.
we're adjourned.
Yeah. Good night.
Night.
Good night.